All right, you're unmuted.
All right, the time is 7:02. It's January 13th. This is the Town Board of Trustees regular meeting. I call this meeting to order. Roll call, please. Oh, pledge, sorry. Yep. Oh, we're not called to order yet. If you want to do the pledge of allegiance, thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
liberty and justice for all. Thank you. It's a new year. I was thrown off my game. All right, it is 7:02 p.m., January 13th, 2025, and I'll call this meeting to order. Roll call, please, Melina.
Trustee Halverson,
Here.
Wakefield,
Here. Here.
There.
Is he still up?
you can see him.
Okay.
I heard him.
Here.
Our volume is down.
I don't think you can hear us, can you?
I can hear you guys.
Oh. Yeah, I can hear you, Ron. I'm not
Fine,
sure if
just
they
one
can hear
sec.
us
We're having issues hearing everyone.
in the room.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Tyler. We see you talking and we do not hear you. Hold on.
You'll hear a quiet computer now. We did get a new processor, so hopefully it doesn't glitch as much. But we're gonna have this really. We can just go to the meeting now. Yeah.
All right, trustee Wakefield,
Here.
We can hear you now.
Okay.
Eckert,
Here.
trustee Gardner,
Here.
trustee George,
Here.
pro tem Harper,
Here.
Mayor Cranker.
Here. Great, thank you. All right, do we have any staff or board revisions to the agenda?
I do have one. You'll notice on agenda item 4E should be ordinance 2025-02, not 2025-01. So I will make that note again when we have a decision at that agenda item.
Okay, 2025-01. Wait, it's
Two.
02.
Yeah, so it's the second ordinance in your agenda. It's item 4E.
I think it's correct on this print.
It's correct on this printout, but not in our packet.
Yeah, I started to correct things.
Yeah, it's great. Any board revisions to the agenda? Okay. All right, we'll move on to public comment. A reminder for anybody that's online or in the audience, so we will be having a hearing shortly related to our land use code. So if you'd like if your comment is related to the land use code, it's better if you include it as part of that public record. You're welcome to make your comment now. But if you want it included as part of that public record for the public hearing, we encourage you to wait till the public comment period for the public hearing for the land use code. And we also have a public hearing. Yeah, so both of our public hearings that will come up very shortly after the Silverton Housing Authority will have time for public comment. But we'll open up for public comment. If you have a public comment, you can come make your comment at the podium. You'll have 3 minutes and then we'll move to online public comment. If you're on Zoom, you can click the raise hand button. We'll promote you to panelist. So do we have any in-person public comment that would like to go now? Okay, doesn't look like we have any in-person public comment at this point. I see a couple hands raised on Zoom. Again, if you'd like this to be related to the land use code public hearing that we'll have shortly, please include it there, but we'll promote you to panelist. Now. Thanks, Melina.
Hello, this is Melody. Can you hear me?
Yeah, thanks, Melody. You have 3 minutes.
Two things. Recently, somebody mentioned something about not putting a notice in the paper because nobody read it. By state statute, every government has to have a paper of record for legal notices. The legal notices are put in the Silverton Standard. So not only do you have to put them in, everybody should read it because that's where the legal notices would be. And I guess they have about 500 papers that go to Silverton addresses. Number two, recently, 5 gentlemen came to a meeting and asked for an accounting of the enterprise funds. I haven't seen that happen. Sorry if I missed it, but it was not an unreasonable request. And it would be a public record for asking for an accounting of those funds. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Tom Shilacki. I lived in Silverton at the Highlander from 2014 to 2017. I would like to acknowledge the passing of my mentor in mine cleanup stuff, Bill Simon. I met Bill in the spring of 2001. I was in Denver when Dr. Robert Blair wanted to start the Center for Mountain Studies in Silverton. I wanted to cover his projects in video. Dr. Blair was just starting the Mountain Studies Institute, so no jobs yet. He pointed me to Mountain Film Festival in Telluride and said if I wanted to help an environmental group, I should ask the Animas River Stakeholders Group in Silverton. Bill Simon was in my first video in 2001. It was a project to clean up the old town dump next to the Animas River. And I attended stakeholder group meetings for years, driving up from Farmington, New Mexico, and then I moved to Durango. We met in the basement of the Miners Union Hospital. Bill was in my video projects for the Pride of the West mine stope closure project and the Silver Ledge mine cleanup project, pulling mine waste away from the creek. Then the Gold King mine spill happened in 2015, and Bill was in my videos on that issue, giving strong insight and guidance. In the past few years, Bill and I spoke on the telephone sometimes, and I visited him at the house and in hospice last spring. I will be out there in June for Ernie Kuhlman's celebration of life, and also I will make it out there for Bill Simon's celebration of life. I just wanted to acknowledge Bill Simon was my mentor, and I will miss him. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for that tribute. Do we have any other comments on Zoom? It doesn't look like it. Again, if you're going to comment on the public hearing, we'll open that up in a little bit. All right. Seeing no more public comment, we'll close this portion of public comment and we'll move on to presentations and proclamations from our housing authority. Take it away, Anne.
Great. Just gonna pull up a presentation. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Happy 2025. The Silverton Housing Authority is an authority organized under Colorado state statute. And according to those statutes, we must present an annual report to the mayor of Silverton every year. And since the Silverton Housing Authority shares a board with the town board, and you all are very familiar with what we've been working on, this is an opportunity as well to share with the greater community what our year looked like in 2024. And for those who don't know me, my name is Ann Chase, and I am the director of the Silverton Housing Authority. This will be a brief presentation about the Silverton Housing Authority, what we accomplished in 2024, and what is next for 2025. This is all pulled from the annual report, and I encourage anyone who is interested in reviewing the report to do so. So 2024 was the first fully operational calendar year of the Housing Authority, and we balanced creating a foundation and a strategy for the organization while also making progress on several housing developments. And from an organizational standpoint, a distinct accomplishment of 2024 was creating our mission and vision statements. And so our mission is to advocate, promote, plan, and provide the long-term supply of affordable housing to support equitable access to housing in the town of Silverton. And our vision is to support the quality of life and economic vitality of the unique community of Silverton by increasing housing choices, opportunities, and education for residents. In 2024, we had board turnover with the town board election cycle in April. And so I want to take this opportunity to thank the founding board for seeing the need to increase our capacity to address affordable housing in Silverton. And I'd like to thank the new board for steering this organization through our beginning stages. It's no easy task to build an organization, especially one that's responding to urgent and pressing needs. So I think we navigated the challenge well, and we're set up to continued growth and increased impact looking towards 2025. Two main focus areas of 2024 were organizational groundwork and housing development. And we'll dive deeper through all of this, but I did just want to put this out there as a general overview of our 2024 activities. Put all together. So like I said, one of the main focuses of this year or last year was organizational groundwork. So we focused on 4 main areas, and that was securing funding, improving communications and messaging, implementing housing policies, and stakeholder engagement. So we applied for 6 grants and 4 have been awarded, 2 are still pending. We'll dive deeper into funding of the authority in a couple slides. And then we really wanted to improve our communications and messaging for our community as we come online as a new organization in the community, who we are, what we're doing. And to do so, we created a website and we have a newsletter. And the QR code on the screen is a sign-up link for the newsletter if anyone's interested. That is the best way to keep track of what the Housing Authority is doing. For housing policy, we adopted the Affordable Housing Guidelines. So this is a document that governs all future affordable housing developments of the Silverton Housing Authority. So that looks like qualification and continuing qualification and deed restriction management. And then we secured funding, and we'll go into this more, for an ADU stock plan. So that's less of a policy, but we'll get into that. It falls into that category. And then stakeholder engagement, 3 community events, and we did a homeownership interest survey with 52 responses. And the second area of focus was housing development. So as you saw earlier, we have 47 housing units in pre-development across these 3 developments. So that's Anvil Townhomes, Boxcar Apartments, and the Zanoni parcel. And these circles here in the yellow line represents the progress of the pre-development. So Anvil Townhomes are almost ready to go. We're just waiting on some final funding acquisition. But a lot of energy and focus was put into these townhomes this year. The Boxcar Apartments and Zanoni parcel are still earlier on in that pre-development process, but great progress was made. So the Anvil Townhome development, that was our main area of focus. In 2024, we released and awarded a request for proposals to a really awesome development team. The Housing Authority has been working closely with Tributary Development to make great progress on our due diligence process. So that includes surveying the property, geotechnical analysis, environmental assessments, a housing market study, and putting the project budget together. The next steps here, waiting for the results of our grants that we applied for. Pushing this through a site plan approval process, and then finalizing the homeowner application and process there. The Boxcar Apartments are in Anvil as well. They are located above the existing Anvil apartments. They're called Boxcar Apartments because they are located next to a historic interpretation site of Boxcar. In partnership with the town of Silverton and the Brownfields grant, the phase 1 and 2 environmental assessments were completed. And we also received funding to do site engineering. So that includes like utilities, really looking at what this site can accommodate for future development. And the next steps are wrapping up this site engineering phase, do this site cleanup, and start to assemble the funding and the team for the project. And our third and final project is the Zanoni parcel, again, in partnership with the Brownfields consultants. The phase 1 and 2 are underway. And then we were awarded technical assistance through the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority to create conceptual plans for the site, which was super helpful to visualize what the highest and best use of this site will be. Next steps will be site cleanup, again, assembling the development team and getting funding together. As we look into 2025, all of these development projects will continue into this year. But we also are pushing forward this other project. It's an ADU stock plan or pattern book. So they're going to be pre-approved plans for ADUs in Silverton, offered at a really reasonable price. And that helps take the time and the capital that it takes to get ADUs built. And so hopefully that'll incentivize the private market to help add and grow our housing stock. And then we also want to increase our educational programming. So that's expanding our reach beyond just housing developments to all people across the housing continuum. So that's renters, that's landlords, homeowners, future home buyers, and sort of rounding out our programming and our reach. For the funding overview, I wanted to begin sort of with the defining the relationship between the town and the housing authority. So the housing authority is a separate legal entity from the town. We do share a board with the town, and the housing authority budget is a fund located within the town of Silverton. So while there is a lot of crossover between the two, they are separate entities with separate legal abilities and obligations. But the housing authority budget is reflected in the town of Silverton budget. So the housing authority does not have a sustainable permanent funding source. So we're heavily grant reliant for operational expenses and programming expenses. This year we had a good variety of grants from the state, from public organizations, and then big partnership and support was from the San Juan County Affordable Housing Fund. And then the $1 million in 2025, the pending award here, will go to Anvil Townhomes if successfully awarded. And then as we reflect on what our impact was this year, I keep thinking of it as a soup. So we got all the ingredients together this year. They're all simmering on low. But once everything's ready to go, it'll be a big pot of soup for everyone, for a whole community to enjoy. But this year was very much so the beginning of everything. So, but our tangible impacts were community outreach activities. So building community, connecting residents to resources, and then also taking a closer look at what the needs are of our community.
Well, and I'd like to pause there for a second because Anne, you've done this with such grace, but I can only imagine that assembling those ingredients felt kind of like being in one of those supermarket game shows where you're running around crazy and gathering all the ingredients. Like, oh, maybe this would work, and maybe this would work, and what if we put this together? And so it's been quite a bit of that effort to put this whole organization together, and you've done it with great grace. So we've got it on simmer.
We got it on
It's
Silverton.
in the crock pot.
Yeah. And then finally, we built and strengthened our relationships with several really key players that make a difference in housing, both at a state level and at a local level. So big thank you to everyone who supported or collaborated with us this year. And then finally, looking into 2025, these are sort of the focus areas of the organization. The next meeting on the 27th will be a goal and priority setting meeting, which will likely touch on all of these other things. But yeah, we're building affordable housing, increasing our programming and resources, organizational stability, and expanding our community or impact in the community. And I'm happy to answer any questions from these slides or the report. And board members, if you have anything to add, you are welcome to do so. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. I was just reflecting on this and thinking back to my time as a member of the Board of Trustees when the Housing Authority was established and we got Anne working on it, and just thinking of how far we've come going on our wonderful trip to Colorado Springs, or Glenwood Springs together, and kind of casting a vision and thinking about what was really needed. And I just think, Anne, I really want to give you a big shout out for all of these things that you've worked on: securing funding, housing policy implementation, stakeholder engagement, and improving communication and messaging. And I think in a new organization, it's easy to do well on a few of your first goals for the year, and you have just really done exemplary on all of your goals for the year. And I know there's a lot of funding things that are out of your control. You've set us up as well as you can for success. And I think I feel personally really grateful for you being in this role and the work that you've accomplished on all of these fronts. And I know people are always eager to see actual units built and people in them and leases signed, but there's so much groundwork that goes into getting people in housing. And you've just built a really great foundation. And I think learned a lot from things in the past, things we've done well, things we haven't done well as a community in this space. And so I just really appreciate your intentionality and transparency and perseverance in these areas. So you've taken us really far in a very short amount of time. So having been with you in Glenwood, been here from the beginning, just really want to give you that kudos.
Thank you.
Great. Any questions from the board or anything else to add?
Super comprehensive. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Anne.
Sam?
All right, and I encourage everybody to go out and read the annual report. It's a great overview of what has been worked on, and check out the website because it's really detailed and provides a lot of information. All right, we're going to move on to agenda item 4A, new business. This is going to be a public hearing, first reading of ordinance 2025-01, an ordinance of the town of Silverton repealing and readopting the land use code and amending the official zoning map. So my understanding, Lucy or Gloria, correct me if I'm wrong, this will proceed like a typical public hearing. We'll have staff presentations, then we'll have public comment, and then we'll move to trustee discussions and deliberation, and then trustee decision. Is that correct? And just a reminder for all of us as we talk about it, because it's this is something we've been working on for many years, and we're finally at this moment to really talk about it and have comprehensive decision-making on it. So just a reminder for trustees, kind of what our decision options are as we go into this, and we can be reminded of this when we move to that point. But we'll hear from staff. We have a draft land use code in front of us. We can adopt that as is. There's some recommended changes at the end. So we can adopt that as is. We can adopt it with conditions, and those conditions can be either the ones the Planning Commission has recommended. It can be a variant of what the Planning Commission recommended. It can be some of them, not all of them, or it could be our own conditions that we choose to add as we discuss. And then we also can continue this to a future date. If there seems to be some real hang up point on something, we can continue it or we can deny it. So those are kind of the options on the table. So keep that in mind as you listen to staff presentations and public comment and where we go from here. So, all right, I'm going to kick it over to staff.
All right. We have
Yeah, we have Gabby and Elizabeth on. So yeah, this is a public hearing, the first of two readings of ordinance 2025-01 to consider for adoption a comprehensive update to the land use code, which we've been working on for the past year and a half and really been preparing for since the adoption of the Compass Master Plan, as well as an update to the official zoning map. And so tonight, the staff report will be given by Gabby Hart of Clarion. And then Elizabeth Garvin of Clarion, Gloria Clayton, and I are all here to assist and answer questions. So with that, I will hand it over to Gabby to lead us through an overview of the proposed land use code and zoning map.
All right, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Thanks, Gabby.
Yes, all right. Let me pull up the presentation.
Feels like a momentous way to start our first meeting of the year.
Okay, can you see the screen? Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. All right. So we are going to walk through the land use code. And so before I get started, I'm going to give a brief summary of the project process itself, including all of our great public engagement that we had the opportunity to do. And then I'll move into just a overview of all of the different articles of the land use code. And in that, there are some highlights of the major changes and the improvements that have been made. And so we'll get through that. And then at the end, I do have all of the recommendations of conditions from the Planning Commission for you all to see and to hear again. And then we can move into the public hearing and further discussion. But to get started, just as one last reminder of our project goals that have been guiding us for the last few years. First and foremost, we were updating the regulations to better reflect and align with the Compass Master Plan. We wanted to create a clear and consistent as well as user-friendly land use code and create more predictable development outcomes by simplifying and clarifying development process and standards in town. This was our project timeline. We got started in August of 2023. And then really the first item that happened was the annotated outline. That was when we did our first in-person outreach events and sort of getting the project out there in the town. And that was our framework for some of the changes that we made as we drafted. We did have a small stakeholder group that we met with throughout the winter of 2024. And they were a great sounding board for reading the drafts and really having the local expertise and the local knowledge for us to incorporate into the code. And then really this past summer was when we did a lot of really great public outreach, really trying to get to getting the code to where it needed to be, getting it to be more understood by town residents, as well as the type of code that's going to work best for the town. And then now we are in adoption. So this is probably a little hard to see, I apologize, but we really wanted to create something that captured the extent of our public outreach because it really was a lot of great work by staff and a lot of great participation from residents. So we did everything from coffee and conversations, open houses. We did various forms of surveys. Also through the winter when we were drafting, we held learning sessions about some of the key topics of the land use code. So things like basic zoning or historic preservation, I think, which were a great way to educate the community about the types of topics in the land use code. So then moving into the summer, tabling at the farmers market as well as at Summer Sounds, and doing some more surveys, and then also meeting with all of the different planning commission, you all, the historic review committee, kind of throughout. And this sort of summarizes, we did a total of 40 meetings, 42 survey responses across the different surveys, and then you can see kind of the number of other events. Another thing that I thought was really great was that we did add 2 work sessions with both the Planning Commission and the board in October and November, when we sort of extended out this timeline a bit further than originally scoped. But that was really because we heard a lot about, we need more time to review this document and the map as a group. And that was requested by both members of the committees as well as residents. So just wanted to highlight that I think that did result in a lot of great improvements to the draft. So moving into the land use code itself, this is the table of contents. There are 11 different articles. The first article really just sets the tone for the code. It establishes the purpose of the land use code and its applicability. It talks about how it relates to other state and federal laws as well as private agreements. And then it also establishes how prior approvals, violations, and then pending applications as well are processed or affected by the new code. The next article is zoning districts. So zoning districts are obviously really the implementing element of the land use code. Those are the set areas of town that have unique sets of standards for how property can be used and what can be built. And so the draft land use code recommends a new zoning district lineup that carries forward the public district. It consolidates the R1 and R1A districts based on current similar dimensional standards and use restrictions. And then we've renamed the other 4 districts to better reflect the intent of the district. So as you can see, there's R1, neighborhood residential, R2 is mixed residential. BP or downtown is now MU1, downtown mixed use. BA has moved to C1, which is gateway commercial. So that right now is kind of the area entering town. And then ED, economic development, that is the new C2, which is employment commercial, and then public has stayed the same. And so within the zoning districts article, there is a table that describes how the districts will be implementing the future land use framework of the Compass Master Plan. So the future land use framework was really what we needed to work with or work on to try and implement the master plan through the districts. This was kind of our best guidance. So that's where a lot of the ideas and suggestions came from. And so part of, alongside the actual land use code itself, is the new zoning map, which will actually establish these zoning districts. So moving into the dimensional standards, so each zoning district is subject to a set of development standards. And so that includes things like minimum lot area, minimum lot width, minimum building setbacks, and then maximum height. So some highlights here, we've decreased the minimum lot area for all zoning districts. And so that does allow for small lot development, or also called single lot development sometimes. We've decreased the setbacks for the front and the side for those single or small lots, just to be able to design a structure to be there and to allow for things like snow shed and spacing. And then another highlight is we have increased the building height by 5 feet only in the R2 district and only for residential structures with 3 or more units. All other heights remain the same as the current code. So those are 30 feet in all districts except for MU1, which is the current BP, which is 40 feet. Oh, something to highlight here is that in the R1, we did establish a maximum lot size. And what that came from was this top portion of text is from the Compass Master Plan, which says that community members have expressed the desire to prevent large single-family homes, and it included examples of establishing a maximum footprint and maximum lot size. So the first thing we did that we got pretty general support for was establishing the 10,000 square foot maximum lot size for all of R1. But then when it came to maximum footprint, we had a lot of discussion around this issue of how and what does it mean to prevent large single family homes, and what is it that we are trying to prevent or trying to control. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the different options that we've explored along the way, because we have done several rounds of this and have gotten community input and feedback that affected each step of the way to really inform what ended up in our recommended code. So the first thing that we looked at was establishing a maximum gross floor area. And we don't need to get into the exact details of this, but just wanted to show that this was our first attempt, was trying to actually set a maximum gross floor area of a structure. So that would include all the floors, including finished basements. And it was scaled by the lot size that the structure would be on. And we did not get a lot of positive feedback about this one. It felt over strict and didn't really get at kind of the issue that we were trying to prevent. So we did at one point have a building footprint limit initially, but it was at 6,000 square feet. And that we heard was much too large still. So the next one was maximum floor area, which is different than the kind of gross floor area, because it addresses proportionality of building to lot size, but allows for a little bit more variation in building form. And again, this one was a bit too much. It was going to limit the types of designs or the types of houses that the town wants to see. And so again, we moved away from that. And so after all of that discussion and really thinking about what it is that we are concerned about when it comes to preventing large single family, is we came back to maximum building footprint. So what is in the draft is that in the R1 district only, for single unit detached and 2-unit townhouses, as well as duplexes. So we're applying this to all of those since they are pretty similar in structure size. The maximum building footprint is 2,500 square feet. And for the definition of building footprint, we are not including accessory structures. When we brought this out to the public at the end of the summer, we were including accessory structures, and we heard a lot about how that wasn't necessary, and that again, that might be too limiting. So that is where we ended up with that. And we really did have a lot of conversation and a lot of input that we really tried to get to the best solution based on the initial guidance from the Compass Master Plan as well. So back into the districts, the one remaining overlay district is the historic district overlay. So this has been updated kind of across the board to include language to become a certified local government. So in 2023, the town moved forward with the desire and intent to become a certified local government. And in order to do that, there are certain regulations and standards that the town has to have in place in order to receive grants and other benefits from the state historic office. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. But things like that were done prior to the code, like solidifying the Historic Review Committee as a separate entity, that was a piece of moving towards certified local government. And then there were a few other things that we needed to get into this land use code update to also move that forward. But so another element of this is that we have replaced the builder's handbook with the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. Those are very well known and common standards in the historic preservation field. And we heard a lot about how the builder's handbook had quite a lot of vagueness and wasn't creating predictable outcomes for applicants. So we're moving towards a more consistent set of guidelines. And then we also removed the architectural review overlay district, which I'll talk about in a bit. So there are still design standards for the historic overlay zone in addition to the Secretary of the Interior standards. The mixed use requirement to maintain an active ground floor remains, but we did clarify that the residential uses can be in the rear of the building. It doesn't have to be the entire ground floor being a non-residential use. It just needs to be kind of that main area along Green. There are still facade treatment, architectural, entry windows and screening requirements. And then the other aspect of this was updating the procedures that went with the historic district overlay. So again, we've cleaned up the HRC information. We've added a new process for historic district overlay designation, as well as historic district overlay review, which has both minor and major. And those are based on certain criteria, and the minor can be decided on by staff versus the major, which will go to the HRC to be reviewed and decided upon. Okay, so moving into the use standards. So the use standards, the three main components of this article are the use table, which is organized by general use category. So it moves from residential to civic to commercial, industrial, accessory, and temporary uses. And so this has been updated to include and carry forward some current uses. We've consolidated some uses that were similar in kind of operational characteristics and impacts, and then also have some new use types in there just to modernize the land use code a bit. Second component is the use specific standards. And so those are additional standards for certain uses based on things like proximity to residential, potential compatibility concerns, safety concerns, environmental, aesthetic, or social characteristics. And then finally, the definition. So every use has a separate definition in that article so that that is easy to interpret for both applicants and staff as well. So this is a clip of the use table. It kind of answers four main questions. So what is it is in the left-hand column. So those are all of the different uses that may be allowed in certain districts. And then where can it go and what process is required is in the middle section. So there's P, which is it's a permitted use. It does not require extra approval, but it will still require things like a site plan, a building permit, all of that. If there is an S, it's a special use and it will have to be reviewed as a special use permit. And then if it's a blank cell, it's prohibited. And then finally, that last column will establish if additional standards apply to that use. So some highlights from uses. We've introduced and defined some new residential uses. So things like cottage court and live work dwelling. We've also added the ability to have tiny homes as a manufactured home park use. For non-residential uses, again, we've consolidated some of those similar use types. So creating a common category of indoor entertainment and recreation, retail sales, rather than listing out all these different types of retail. Typically, it's more so the size that affects things rather than what they are selling. We've introduced some other new uses like animal services, commercial greenhouse or nursery, artisan industrial, so smaller industrial, and outdoor storage. For accessory and temporary uses, we've added electrical vehicle charging stations, propane tanks to really acknowledge that, you know, there will continue to be a need propane tanks in Silverton. And so really having those regulations established in the code is great. Solar energy systems, so solar panels. And then for temporary uses, things like farmers markets, food trucks, portable storage units, temporary events and sales. And then we also incorporated the current temporary outdoor dining regulations as well. So next is subdivision design and improvement. So though much of Silverton is platted, these are the standards that will be necessary for any new subdivision of land. So it includes design standards, as well as all the different required improvements like water and sewer, sanitary sewer, fire hydrants and utilities, all of those sorts of things. Also within this section, we have replaced the current public land dedication requirement that's based on the value of gross land with the simpler provision of dedicating a minimum amount of gross land area, so 10% for parks and recreation, open space, school sites, or municipal facilities, or as current, the applicant can also provide cash in lieu. Few other things, we decreased the maximum block length from 1,500 to 600, just to better scale that to what is currently built and established in the town. We've also clarified some permit requirements from county and CDOT for certain road access. The next article is environmentally sensitive lands. And so this is where we have replaced what are currently overlay districts with just straight sets of standards and criteria to be met when development is proposed within those hazard areas. And so really that's more of a functionality shift, so that if boundaries change or you know, certain things like that happen, rather than having to remap your overlay district and do a land use code text amendment to do so, you would have a reference to the current map and that could be updated as needed. So we've established separate procedures and applications for development impacted by hazards. And then the hazard maps are still available for general reference and referenced in the code. They just, again, are not specifically overlay districts. And so that includes the avalanche, flood, and slope hazard, which are current. And then we've introduced a wildfire hazard area, so that's new. So some highlights of the avalanche hazard area. We've updated this approach based on peer communities and best practices. At the moment, we're carrying forward the most current map which this says February 1998, but I believe it might actually be 2005. Either way, it's the most current one that the town has been using. But we have clarified that in the high hazard red zone, no new permanent residential or non-residential occupied structures can be constructed. And then in the moderate hazard blue zone, there are minor and major development permit types depending on what is being proposed. So things like single unit dwellings, ADUs, open space, minor utilities, accessory buildings, seasonal development, those are a minor development permit versus all other construction would require a major development permit. The flood hazard area, these standards really have not changed. We've reorganized it and aligned it with best practices. And for any development that happens in the area, a flood hazard development permit is required, and that is an administrative decision. For the slope hazard area, so we've expanded the current standards. So the standards apply to any development on lots with an average slope of 25% or greater. And then it's separated as anything 25% or greater requires the engineering study. There are building location limitations, erosion and grading standards and street standards, and anything greater than 30%. All of that is still applicable, but also a special use permit is required versus the others would just need a slope hazard development permit, which is an administrative review. The wildfire hazard requirements include a study that details wildfire mitigation actions, both as part of the design of the building or site, as well as during construction. And so these requirements apply to any development in the high intensity wildfire risk areas as established by the Colorado State Forest Service. And then those studies would be referred out and sent to the Colorado State Forest Service for their review. Next article is site development standards. So related to mobility, connectivity, and parking, we've established minimum sidewalk and pedestrian walkway system requirements. We've introduced basic off-street parking design standards, not minimum requirements, just if it is being provided. There are some surfacing requirements as well as size of spaces. For bicycle parking, multi-unit, so that's 5 or more dwelling units, are encouraged, not required, to provide 1 short and 1 long-term bicycle parking space per unit. And then along with that, if it is provided, we have some bicycle parking design standards as well. Next is landscaping and screening. These are pretty minimal. There's some state required language required to the prohibition of non-functional turf beginning in 2026 for non-residential principal uses. And then we've incorporated some roof mounted mechanical and utility equipment screening and clarified the maximum fence height at 6 feet. The sort of biggest portion of this that I think we had the most discussion about was related to site and building design standards. So we've moved to an approach that has a tiered standard for building design. So this relates to earlier when I said we are removing the architectural review overlay zone. So there are now townwide standards, those standards for the historic district that we already discussed, and then standards for Green Street. And so those would be what is essentially replacing AROD. So the townwide design standards are pretty basic. There are some standards related to roofs, eaves, and parapets, building for the climatic conditions of Silverton, a prohibition on reflective materials, on-site snow shedding and storage requirements, and then some standards around refuse containers as well as mechanical equipment. This is where the standard that utilities should be undergrounded unless otherwise approved is also stated. Something to highlight here is there is a new bulk plane limitation for small lots. And this came out of our early conversations, actually from the prior board that wanted to sort of control or help make small lot development more compatible. And so what this bulk plane does is it limits the building envelope to prevent infill structures being inconsistent with neighboring properties. And so there are some exceptions to allow for things like dormers, shed and side gabled roofs, as well as solar panels. But really, again, the intent was to make sure that we were trying to scale any of that infill development on lots that might not currently be able to be built on, so are vacant between two existing structures, to be not cause any impact. So the next set of standards are these Green Street standards. And so these apply to all lots adjacent to Green Street outside the historic district. So part of removing the architectural review overlay district was removing the overlap that was happening currently. So it's confusing to know if the historic district standards superseded the A-ROD, so on and so forth. So this was also a way to remove that conflict. But these standards stemmed from conversations about the fact that, you know, it is the heritage tourism corridor. It is the sort of main stretch through the town, and there is a bit of historic character to it, but also trying to balance room for creative design and the ability for people to build on their properties. You know, we went back and forth on these requirements a bit too, and what we ended up with were some basic building orientation standards that the primary entrance must face the street, some basic building mass and form and material standards, some basic roof form limitations, parking locations. So if it is on site, if it's being provided, it should be located in the side or the rear if possible. And then another aspect of this is that fundamentally staff would be reviewing the design standards as part of their review. But there is the option for them to refer applications to the Historic Review Committee if they are concerned about the fact that since the structure is on Green Street and if they were having trouble applying the standards. So there is still the ability for the Historic Review Committee to be involved like they have been on the Architectural Review Overlay District. But it's fundamentally a staff review. Next is outdoor lighting. So because the town is moving forward with becoming an official dark sky community, the regulations have been drafted to comply with the minimum requirements for designation by Dark Sky International. So these are more than just dark sky friendly. These are actually the requirements that in order to get that formal designation, the town has to meet. So the draft requires fully shielded fixtures, restricting light spill, limits the temperature of lights, and then establishes a lumen per acre limit. It regulates special outdoor lighting and includes some exemptions. And it requires compliance of all lighting, not just any of the new lighting that comes in that time, but all lighting to be compliant within 10 years. And what this will mean moving forward is that a lighting plan needs to be submitted by a professional so that staff can review for compliance. The next article is signs. We've made some basic updates to address federal requirements related to content neutrality, which limits sign regulations to be related to time, place, and manner restrictions. You can't prohibit the specific content of signs. It clarifies how to measure building frontage when calculating how much signage each property can have, how to measure sign area, and how to measure freestanding sign height. And then we've also consolidated all of the temporary sign regulations for user friendliness and clarity. The key updates is the simplification of the number, size, and height limitations applicable to permanent signs in town. So in all non-residential zoning districts, the total sign area has been simplified to being 1.25 square feet per lineal foot of building frontage. And if it's a multi-tenant building, it's per tenant space. And then the final sort of big piece of the land use code are the administration and procedures. There are four main parts of this article: the review and decision-making bodies, which establishes all the different reviewing bodies, the development review procedures, and then specific procedures are separated into administrative procedures, so administrative decisions, and then those that require a public hearing. So within the review and decision-making bodies, we've consolidated any information about the San Juan Regional Planning Commission, the Board of Adjustment, the Historic Review Committee, and the Floodplain Administrator. So that includes things like the purpose, duties, membership, and procedural details of all of those bodies. The development review procedures begins with a summary table. So this is kind of the main event of this article. It lists all of the different procedures and whether a pre-application or informational community meeting is required, as well as which decision-making body is making the decision on the application. And then the article continues with common review procedures. And so common review procedures are those things that apply to most development applications in the town. So things like a pre-application meeting, submitting the application, the staff review of the application, public notice requirements, the actual review and decision action, and then any post-decision actions. And so any exceptions to the common procedures are listed in the specific procedure. And so again, those are split into administrative and public hearing. We've moved some procedures from requiring a public hearing to being administratively decided to simplify the process for all. Each specific procedure generally contains a purpose statement, the applicability, the common review process, review and decision-making responsibility, as well as the actual review criteria, appeal information, and then expiration information. The next article is nonconformities. There are four types of nonconformities. There's uses, structures, lots, and signs. And for each of those, the new land use code includes information clarifying that non-conforming status is established when it is in existence and lawfully so, when code standards are changed. The regulations also confirm the authority to continue to use the land or the structure, and it also allows for minor repair that don't increase, the amount of nonconformity, And it also determines at what point a nonconformity must be brought into compliance with the current code. The final two articles address enforcement and penalty provisions, and then the definitions and measurements. So this enforcement and penalties is a new article to describe how the town enforces code regulations, what is considered a violation, and then the penalties and remedies available for the violation. This article also includes the current building and property appearance and maintenance section that prohibits buildings in all districts from being boarded up, although currently this only applies within the BP, I believe, but it is recommended to be applied throughout town. But we've also added flexibility in there for the ability to use certain materials to board windows for temporary winter protection, understanding that that's necessary in town. And then finally, the definitions and measurements. So this, again, is the full sort of glossary of terms of the entire code. But we've also included a lot of clarification about how to measure things like building footprint, height, lot area, lot width, the clear vision triangle. And we've tried to align terminologies and definitions as much as possible with other town documents and policies like public works and housing. So this is the zoning map I mentioned earlier that is proposed to be adopted alongside the land use code itself. As you can see, generally, it's a, conversion map where most properties have had a one-to-one conversion. But there are a few that, as we discussed in prior meetings, there are a few that have been recommended to change just based on existing conditions, existing uses, but other than that, no major rezonings are proposed. So moving into the Planning Commission recommendation. So the Planning Commission recommended approval, and it included the addendum, but also they had 10 different conditions. And we can come back to these slides if we need to, but I'll walk through these once. So they have a condition to allow single unit attached dwellings with 3 or more units, triplex or fourplex dwellings, and multi-unit dwellings in the C1 to also be built to a height of 35. So essentially applying that R2 ability that we have suggested to the C1 as well. Allowing individual owners to operate multiple vacation rentals in the MU1 district only, and prohibit vacation rental owners in MU1 from maintaining a vacation rental in any other district. The proposed language related to vacation rentals is that there is only one vacation rental allowed per person. And so their suggestion is that in the MU1, you should be able to have multiple. But if you do have it in an MU1, you cannot have it in any other district. Changing duplex dwelling from a use by rights to requiring a conditional use by right permit, which we are interpreting as special use permit in the R1 district. Currently, those are recommended to be allowed by right in the R1 district. 2 things related to the slope hazard area development, removing the maximum disturbance provisions, and not requiring a special use permit for development on slopes 30% or greater, just keeping the slope hazard development administrative permit. Next, replacing some of the language in the avalanche hazard map reference from the specific study to language that says most recently updated avalanche mapping study. exempting all construction in the MU1 from the small lot bulk plan limitations. And this comes from the fact that obviously a lot of the buildings in downtown are more rectangular or square or, take up the majority of the lot. And it was not the intent of those standards to limit that type of, or to limit building on small lots in BP. Even when we were first discussing this, it was more so small lot development in R2, I believe, was the first district we kind of talked about. So that is where that came from. They also wanted to amend the portion of their planning commission membership information that it shall consist of 2 members from the Board of Trustees, 1 member from the Board of County Commissioners, and 4 at-large members appointed by the Planning Commission. Adding a new section that allows for the town administrator to refer any administrative decision to the Planning Commission. This was a staff requested edit because currently there's only 1 or 2 application types that are administrative that specifically say it can be referred to the Planning Commission. But staff would like the ability for that to be applicable to any administrative decision. And then also removing the maximum building footprint restriction for duplexes in R1. And then finally, sorry, I know this is a lot, but as we got through the recommendation hearings and meetings about this, some topics came up that were not related directly or able to be addressed in the land use code, but that the Planning Commission wanted, had a lot of desire to pursue in the future. So they also have a recommendation that the board prioritize considering the annexation of unincorporated town-owned land and associated mapping boundary fixes that would go with that. Exploring the creation of a new townwide avalanche hazard map. So that's where the change of language in the condition came from. Reevaluating the land use code within 1 year of adoption. And then directing staff and planning commission to develop design standards after adoption and to pursue creating a sub-area plan for the gateway area after adoption. So that is everything. As mentioned before, since now it's been a while since you've heard it, sorry. The board has the authority to approve the land use code as is. The addendum is really some basic either formatting or grammar or just sort of little clarifications that staff had noticed. And then all of these conditions of the Planning Commission, you can either take some, take none, take all, and then add your own conditions as well. And then staff will incorporate any of the conditions and amend the text before it's finalized and enacted. So any sort of conditions that you would have put on an approval would end up in the text before it's goes into effect. So with that, I can pass it back to you all.
Thanks, Gabby. That was very thorough. I think very helpful for all of us. Thank you, Jim and Lindsay, who've been on the planning commission, who've been through this multiple rounds. So that was the staff presentation. Thank you, Gabby, for all that thoroughness. It's now the time that we'll open it up for public comment, and then we'll have trustee discussion, deliberations. We can ask questions to staff. So we will open it for public comment during this public hearing. If you're in person and you'd like to make a public comment on this land use code and what has been presented or what's in the code, you're welcome to do that now. You can come to the podium, introduce yourself. You'll have 3 minutes. If you're online and would like to make a public comment, click the raise hand button. And after we get through in-person public comment, we'll move to online. So do we have any in-person public comment related? Go ahead. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Mike Barney. I'd like to thank everyone who worked on the code rewrite. It seems like a lot of thought went into it. It seems like a huge step for Silverton and great thing overall. One question I had was about the maximum square footage for single family dwellings. I was wondering, so if you had a basement, first and second floor at that 2,500, could you build then a 7,500 square foot home?
And typically staff doesn't respond to public comment.
Okay.
Stuff, but that's something we can do in trustee discussion.
Yeah, so I think typically with
So we,
comment, we take the questions and then we can raise your question for staff.
Okay, well, that's how I understand it. And it just says in the master plan, and I think we, decided as a community, or there was brought up, it states in the master plan that we didn't want mansions in Silverton, and that is a mansion. And it's somewhere that I don't have a great solution for it by any means, but I think that if we have someone build, I think it's naive to think that people aren't going to build to maximum square footage. And I think that if we have a 7,500 square foot home that's built in Silverton, it's really going to change things. And then it's just going to be too late. And it's going to be there for 100, 200 years or whatever structure lasts. So I think it's kind of a big deal. And I think it's something that we should really consider moving forward, and maybe even try to come up with, an adjustment for that maximum square footage. Thank you.
Thanks. We have other in-person public comment? All right, we love the participation anyways. It doesn't look like we have any more in-person public comment. If you're on Zoom, click the raise hand button and Melina will promote you to panelist. You can introduce yourself and you will have 3 minutes. And as mentioned before, typically with public comment, we don't engage it like a dialogue. You can make your public comment. If there's questions or comments raised, then the trustees can consider that during trustee discussion and ask staff clarifying questions.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. Please introduce and go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Shane Goranson. My wife and I bought a lot at to be decided Green Street. It's at 5th and Green Street, right as you're coming into town on the left. We bought that lot in 2021. We looked at several different lots and we decided to buy the lot with the most amount of property rights, and we were relying on the land use code that was in place and is still in place now. We want to move to Silverton eventually, but as I think everybody is aware, building costs begin to skyrocket. And so we're going to have to try and be flexible in how we use our property. We're very excited about being a part of Silverton. Also very excited about the updated land use code. Looking at the proposed maps of development, I think Silverton is going to be an even better place than we imagined it would be when we bought a lot there. It was important for us to hire a local crew. Nico Foster Construction is building our house right now. We wanted local workers, and in fact, our neighbor, Cody Brayford, dug our foundation. The point that I would like to make tonight is that between 5th Street and 6th Street, bordering on Green Street, is going to be changed according to the proposed land use code from business pedestrian to residential 2. I believe that will result in some of our property rights being taken away, leaving us with less flexibility in terms of how we use our property. That's a problem for us, but I think it's an even bigger problem for Cody, because he's been running a business down the block from us for 12 years. And this is going to have a major impact on his livelihood through no fault of his own. I think he wanted to speak tonight, but his mother passed away and he is driving home to Minnesota right now. And he graciously allowed me to speak on his behalf. And so I do have concern about the property rights being taken away from my family and from Cody. So just real quickly, between 6th and 7th Street, it's going to be business pedestrian. Across the street from our block on Green Street is also business pedestrian. So I think that maintaining the block between 5th and 6th Street as business pedestrian would be in character with the surrounding property. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Gordon.
This is John Wright. Can you hear me?
We can, go ahead.
Good, thank you. I would not accept a zoning map that fails to correctly identify streets and roads within the town limits and fails to include contiguous town property within the town limit boundaries. For specifics, those of you on the town board of trustees that have not reviewed the letter or the statements that I made to the planning commission, I invite you to do so now. The initial letter is in your packet. And that is all I have to say. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Mr. Wright.
Good evening, Board of Trustees. You guys hear me?
We can, go ahead.
All right, thank you. My name is Logan Austin. I appreciate all the BOT members and of course staff and everyone's participation in this LUC rewrite. I know it's been a very extensive process to date, and I think you guys have done a pretty dang good job of trying to cover all the bases with it. I did want to make a public comment addressing two specific items that I guess you could consider myself in opposition of. The first of which is within section 15-3-50, which is the use specific standards, section B number 4, which relates to vacation rentals and that ownership provision. I know the staff member from Clarion who did a lot of this write-up did talk about the Planning Commission's proposed amendment for the MU1 and removing that one ownership requirement as is currently proposed. I think that is a better direction, especially when the entire commercial district is for commercial uses. There's nowhere else in the LUC where, there's a dictation on a private property owner of how many bars they can own or how many hotels they can own. So I don't know why, owning multiple vacation rentals would be an issue within the MU1 area. So I think that should be removed and changed to align with the Planning Commission's recommendation. My second comment I'd like to make relates again to section 15-3-50. This one is section A, and it's about the 100 square foot per dwelling of bulk storage for what we would consider multifamily or higher density units. I feel this is, just a little bit of a regulatory overreach as far as a design standard, especially understanding that, when it comes to multifamily dwellings and one of the key needs within Silverton being higher density housing and availability of units in general, carving out such a large piece of property this seems a bit onerous to me and counterintuitive, understanding that over 2024 within the recent sales throughout town, the average price per foot of a home was almost $400, if not $450 a square foot. So you're talking about a lot of unrealized value in a unit, especially when you take into account furthermore some of the setback requirements, square footage, encumbrances that have to occur when you're building a higher density unit count on multiple lots. You really have to maximize every square footage of each unit, and to require builders to put 100 square feet of bulk storage basically is building something that may or may not even be used. And it just seems like it's an avenue to almost manage town like an HOA would, where they don't want people to have skis or bikes out front, which just seems, again, I think counterintuitive to kind of the culture and charm of what Silverton is. So that was my comments for this evening. Thank you all for your great work, and I wish you the best.
Thank you. Again, thanks for your patience online. If you have your hand raised, we see you and we'll get to you.
Hey, this is Melody again. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to make sure that no matter what you do for annexations, you do not expand the National Historic Landmark. It's a burden that shouldn't be extended on any new annexation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any more comments on Zoom? Doesn't look like it. All right, we'll close this portion of public comment and we'll move on to trustee discussion deliberations. We have options to ask questions to staff and get clarification. I just want to kick it off by just giving a huge thank you. First of all, Playground, thank you. I mean, I know you're your contact and it's your job, but we just really appreciate the hours and the intentionality and listening. So to Elizabeth and Gabby, thank you for your involvement in our community. To our staff, you've spent countless hours walking around town, having meetings, hearing from folks. Really appreciate the intentionality in structuring this, shepherding this through. This has been a long process. Trial by fire, baptism, Lucy, I would say. I really also want to thank the stakeholder group. That was a group of really dedicated community members who spent hours of their free time. This is not their job, right? And they spent hours of their time really thinking through some hard things and thinking through what this looked like for Silverton, sharing their input, hearing from staff and Clarion, reading multiple drafts of the code, providing multiple rounds of feedback. So huge thank you to the stakeholder group. Big thank you to the planning commission. You guys have engaged on so many levels. This originally started with you. The master plan process started with the planning commission, however many years ago. And here we are now with, on the precipice of a revised land use code. So huge thank you to the planning commission members for their time and attention, and to this board. We've had multiple work sessions. I know a new board has gotten into this, but has been paying attention for a while. For those of us who've been on the board that awarded this contract and got this started with supportive staff, just shout out to my colleagues and to the community. I mean, we have in our packet detailed comments from community members of people who have thoughtfully read these drafts, engaged with these issues. We are a small but mighty community with a lot of great experts, really amazing colleagues, neighbors, friends that care about what the future of this community looks like. And so what I think we have here, as I sit and reflect on where we've come from, this whole process, this really feels like the public process at work. And I know we've had so many meetings and we have lots of comments where there might be some differences of opinions. We might quibble on the margins. But as a whole, when I think about where we've come from and taking the master plan as like a starting point, what do we really want from this? We wanted it to be easier to read, more straightforward. We wanted it to be better organized. We wanted it to be more predictable. We wanted it to allow for more types of things in more places and to not tie people down to processes that they didn't quite know what was going to happen. They didn't know what the timeline was going to be. They didn't know how much it was going to cost them. And I think, again, there are things we can work through. There's conditions that I love and conditions I don't love, and we can talk through that now. But I just want to acknowledge how far we've come and how close we've gotten to something that really can help positively shape the future of this community. So I think it's a time to kind of celebrate that, even while we discuss things we might want to change and emphasize and conditions we might have. But I just kind of wanted to put that thank you out to all of those that have touched this, dedicated hours to this, and gotten us this far. So I'll kick that off and open it up for debate and discussion. Can I do a thank you? Absolutely. It's like Jim and I have been sitting on the planning commission for a long process. Really fun. Just really specific thank yous to, I mean, Clarion, I know it's your job, but there were like 2 a power outage and the service outage, and you all were so responsive to changing meetings, shifting them, and to the planning commission for like being really intentional of we're gonna have the meeting, we're gonna talk through it, and then Clarion and Lucy doing an incredible job at taking like pretty blunt feedback, coming up with a creative solution that tries to meet a lot of different needs. And from what I've seen in various versions of, is like everything in here is very intentional and well thought out. And there's like a reason it was written that way. So that's like, there's a lot of compromise in like pretty much every single word of the draft, and it's come a long way. So thank you. So.
Hey, everyone. I'm sorry I'm not there in person today, but I'm wondering if before we kick it off, maybe if town staff we can get some clarification on the footprint, the 2,500 max that Mike Barney had a question with, just to address that public comment really quickly. Just like if you can build up and.
This is like, if the intention is to say we really don't want McMansion, and in our minds that 7,500 square feet does this get us there? With this limitation, could someone still build a 7,500 square foot home above grade or below grade or?
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Gabby.
The definition of building footprint is the ground level footprint of a building measured to the exterior faces. That includes enclosed projections like porches, decks, and balconies. But it's just that ground level. So yes, they could have the basement wouldn't count, and the upper floor would not count either.
One.
Yeah. Mhm.
Why originally the A-Rod said regardless couldn't do anything more than 6,000.
And that number came down from 3,000 square feet in it from November down to 2,500 square feet. So that did come down to limit that McMansion feel. Just acknowledging that. Well, I think an interesting component to this discussion is we're kind of talking about this on multiple levels, right? We're talking about like form and scaling. Well, let's think about the hillside. Are we talking about we don't want super tall structures that are massive and just feel like obtrusive to what it looks like on the hillside? Well, but what if someone built a sprawling ranch that was not 2 stories, but was more? So are we trying to protect an intention of who lives here and what kind of town we are and what kind of economic opportunities people have and what type of homes people trying to have limitations around form and scale. And I think there could be a lot of reasons on that. And I have seen this go through multiple iterations and we haven't. The solution around what we're actually trying to protect against or design for hasn't seemed to be perfectly nailed yet. So a lot of unknowns. And Anthony had a really good note, which is in a packet, that this is like a land use code we're trying out, and to have regular check-ins with the planning commission, the building department, and review within a year. Because we don't know if people are going to come in and build that 7,000 square foot home or not, and what that actually will feel like. So it's also, some things are just
hard to know. One of the conversations of the planning commission was at a certain point, you're kind of just like picking numbers. And so that's kind of a challenge there too. And some things are hard to regulate. Or what are you trying to regulate for?
There are unintended consequences of almost every decision, and I think it's important for us to keep that in mind as we go through the process.
But I like doing little checkups. I like the fact that we want to engage and see what works, what doesn't. I like it. Maybe this is one of those instances where we come back in the room and say, yeah, everything's bad.
Well, in real world examples, when Lucy gets applications, like you're able to play it out. I don't know if a 1 year cycle of building is long enough. Maybe it's a 2 year. Yeah, I know we could talk about it. But I guess one question I had for the board is I know we've received some really thoughtful public comment and detailed. I think some of that public comment is sort of addressed in potentially some of the conditions from the planning commission. We also got some public comment here. Question I have for the board is it helpful, or are there any burning questions from the public comment that we've gotten that you'd like staff to talk through or address? I would like to give one clarification on the planning commission's recommendation for adjusting the vacation rentals. And yes, is that Jim and I did not vote alongside the rest of the planning commission based on our conversation from September, whenever that was. We as a board met and discussed this issue and decided to limit vacation rentals. So there wasn't a unanimous decision there. So that's good. And I know we have some board members online. So was there, Amy, you asked that clarifying question. Were there any other questions from public comment that we received as part of our packet or elsewhere or tonight that you really wanted to ask staff to clarify?
Yeah, I would like to bring up the public comment from John Wright and the letter. And one of the reasons I think it's really important is that, the suggestion that he made was that we should be wary of adopting the zoning map at all when there are mislabeled streets and borders. And obviously the entire land use code hinges upon having an accurate zoning map that we can, use to apply. But the point he made about, people not being able to get maybe insurance because of errors on that. Is that accurate? And if so, that's a real concern as we watch what's happening with wildfires in California and other places. If people, can't get homeowners insurance because we have a mislabeled map, then that's something that we need to address immediately. So yeah, is that something that, and then if, as he detailed in his letter, all of the different areas that might be mislabeled, is that something that is easy to fix, or is that gonna be a major push as well?
So that's a great question and a great point, and something that Gloria and I have talked about. So the zoning map in your packet is was created using GIS, and GIS pulls data from services like Google Maps. And so there's a larger issue here, and it's has to do with addressing and reporting the changes of streets names to the correct authorities, be it CDOT or be it like the United States Postal Service. So that's the larger issue here, and that's just where we pull our data from to create these maps. So tonight, if we do adopt the zoning map, what we're adopting are those zones, not necessarily the names of the streets on that specific map. So in order to address that issue, it doesn't really have to do with, making changes to the zoning map, which, we can probably go in and we could probably edit that to make it read better, but it's a larger issue that needs to be addressed outside of this process. And then in terms of town boundaries, the map reflects our current town boundaries based on actual boundaries that we get from DOLA. And so if we wanted to address our town boundaries, we need to do an annexation.
Yeah, and I think most of us remember the previous annexation. that we did, and that wasn't a quick process. Okay, but so if we do adopt this current zoning map, what this is focusing on is really strictly zoning, and what can be, and the shading and what people can do in which areas.
Yep, and staff is aware of the larger issue. And we'll work on that and bring that to you all at a later date.
Just a side note, the Zoom, the audio, it's kind of crackly. I don't know if anyone else is feeling that
Really
too,
tinny.
but it's a little tough to hear.
It's probably the radiator behind us picking up. So we'll try to talk louder.
Okay, yeah, I just got a comment too. Just
It's like super loud. So
yeah.
Sorry, guys. So what I hear staff saying is that you feel comfortable recommending proceeding with the land use code adoption and the conversion map while we understand and know and are addressing these actual boundary issues and map issues.
Yes, we can't actually address that in the land use code or in our zoning map. A much larger project, and we've already tasked, Devin is already on that portion of that project. Thank you.
So to answer that overall question and Tyler's question more directly, do we adopt it with a little asterisk saying that we're doing this? Or is it just, we're doing it and that's it?
I would say it's part of the additional conditions that the planning commission recommended, and you all can prioritize that, but we've kind of internally prioritized that, knowing that someone can't have home insurance right now. So our goal is to have this completed by April. And that's our current internal goal.
We did discuss it, the insurance part of it at the last, second to last.
Right.
Commission meeting.
So we've already started on that portion of it. Without trustee direction, but it was operational need.
Thanks, Tyler. Other questions from the board or clarification from staff on the presentation or on public comment received?
Do you mind if I do a clarification real quick? So this land use code applies to new builds. It applies to, so if you're in a zoning district that might have changed and you have a business that's being used as a business and it's being turned into residential, like we heard in public comment, that's allowed to proceed until that property is sold. And even if that property is sold, they can apply to keep that designation as well. So I just wanted to clarify that. And the same thing goes that if you have for vacation rentals in downtown MU and you're one owner, that stays as well. And so it would just preclude anyone else from being able to do that.
Right. So much of this is protecting or keeping things in place that have existed in the past, and some of that's handled with non-conforming uses, right? And potentially if a building or structure is destroyed or sold, that can trigger some changes. But if you have an existing use like that, it's not like all of a sudden you have to shut your business down.
Right, yeah, once this is adopted, there should be no immediate change to current operations that are in conformance with our current land use code. If anything does become a nonconformity, it will fall under the nonconformity section, which anyone can review. And then, yeah, there are certain things that would trigger an area or a property or structure to come into conformity with the current code. Thanks.
I had a question on comment we got from Mr. Travis Moore about the slope hazard stuff. It seems like we've kind of tackled a bit of that in the conditions from the planning commission. Is that correct? Yep. Yeah. Okay. That was my impression. And then we had another comment too about some of the slope stuff with needing to get studies about, what's the impact on drainage like 2 blocks away. And so how was that kind of handled or perceived from planning commission discussions or staff perspective?
Yeah, so the current code requires that there is a drainage study for areas surrounding within 500 feet. And there was public comment saying that that was a burden on owners, but the planning commission did not make a recommendation to change that standard in the code. Was it discussed? Or not so much in depth? Not in depth. Yeah, I mean, that was one that did stand out to me because again, I kind of always approach these reviews and conditions and potential unintended consequences with this idea of, well, does it make it easier for the average person or harder for the average person? And in some instances, for public health, safety, well-being, we have to like require reports, require studies. But this was one where it did just strike me like, well, what are the pros and cons to studying what the water is doing 500 feet away from that property? But as we get into slope building, there is going to be more impact from having more impervious surfaces. So the hillside continues to be an expensive place to build. Yeah. Okay. And then my other question. I think that was it. Any questions or clarification? And again, we are getting comments and text that the audio is not great. I apologize. I mean, the only solution is come on down and join us in town hall. We're all here. But we do our best. Move our mic closer to you guys. We've heard it's not the background noise. Not the background. No.
No, I'm wondering if it's it sounds like it's kind of going digital and then out, which I don't know if maybe one of the connections isn't done all the way. But it's definitely, I don't think it's background noise. It's sort of going digital and then not. It's like a bad radio.
Well, we keep working on it and I will keep having discussions. There were a couple of things that I wanted to open up for. I would say in general, I really appreciated the planning commission's conditions. I think I agreed with all of them except for the special use permit for one. I am going to really advocate strongly for allowing duplexes as a use by right in R1. And I would say a couple reasons for that. One, I think it is very much in line with the master plan. I was involved in all those land use discussions from the beginning about housing use. And every time we talked about how can we allow potential for more density and appropriate scaling. And we also talked about how can we incentivize the private market to build more units that are more affordable. I'm not saying that a duplex is inherently deed restricted and affordable, but if you can house two households on one lot instead of one large household on a lot, I'm always in favor of that. I also did a little walkabout because I've heard some arguments about not allowing duplexes in R1 because it kind of changes the character of our traditionally single family home neighborhoods. Well, between 10th and the courthouse on Reese and Snowden, there are 6 duplexes. And I do not hear any complaints about them. I think you probably don't even realize they're duplexes. There's duplexes on my hillside. There's duplexes all throughout that neighborhood that very much fit the form, the scale, the fit of that neighborhood. And so I think we already have examples of those types of structures in those what have been referred to as traditionally single family neighborhoods. We also have multi-units in those neighborhoods, and we had about 5 ADUs. So I counted 6 duplexes, 5 ADUs, and 3 multi-units already that fit the historic character and have been there for a while or have been there for several years. So I would really argue for allowing duplexes there. It doesn't mean we're automatically going to have a duplex on every infill lot in that area. It just means it's allowed. And I think it's really important to allow that type of use where it already is in existence when we can house 2 households. I would just much rather see 2 units that are inherently cheaper than one large single family home that potentially turns into a vacation rental or a short-term rental or a second home. So that is my strong appeal of opposing the condition to put a special use requirement on duplexes in R1.
I agree completely, Dana. I was getting ready to make a very similar, thank you, articulating that so well. Thanks.
And I was looking at my notes from that discussion. There was a lot of conversation and we've been back and forth in the planning commission about this for a few months now. Around look and feel, but kind of going back to that, like maybe there needs to be more of a division between R1 and R1A. It's like that was a part of the conversation. And then also kind of a way to figure out how to blend the duplexes to look, you know, not like something that would stand out. Making sure to clarify, like they're not building apartment buildings in R1 or in R, yeah, R1, yeah. Anymore. So I think those were some of the conversations because I think the point was taken that density and a need for more homes for people to live here. And they already exist. They don't stand out in that neighborhood. I would challenge anybody who walks that neighborhood and like, you kind of have to figure out, oh yeah, there's two guys there. Or that's a top bottom. There's quite a few split level top bottom in historic neighborhoods. They're more energy efficient. They're more economically effective. There's so many reasons why they're great. And like you said, Rosie, we're not talking about an apartment. Yeah, Ron, we can see your hand raised and then Amy.
You're really hard to understand. I can kind of hear what other people are saying, but what you're saying is just rattles.
Sorry, Ron. Oh.
So,
Hold on.
Yeah.
Ron, I want to make sure that we also have ability to hear any of your comments or questions. Did you have a comment or question as well?
That's it for now, but I can hear you okay now. I don't know what you guys did, but
Sounds like you may have fixed it. It's something's much better.
Do you want me to repeat my comment or would you like to add on?
we can hear us. We'll wing it from there.
Okay, go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, so I agree. I'm okay with having duplexes in R1. I just am against lifting any restrictions for the footprint. The split, the 2,500 footprint for any house in R1, even duplexes, because you can build up, you still can do it, I believe.
I agree.
So that is just, yeah, that's my opinion on that one.
So this was what was good to have builders' feedback on this. On the planning commission was that it's very challenging to build a duplex in that footprint that actually has like real square footage, like an actual place to live. So that was kind of the conversation we had, that's just a challenge as a builder.
And this is a question I had for anybody who had heard from some of our builder friends, because it's silly to have a use that supposedly tries to help incentivize a certain type that is completely unusable. So, question. Yeah. I just am in favor of policies that make it easier to house more people. And again, we're not talking about an apartment building. I don't think we're going to get monstrous. And we already have corner units that are multi-units. Like that neighborhood doesn't feel, it feels great. It feels great. And we even have instances of taller buildings. I know those have been special use in PUDs, but I'm not totally sure what we're really afraid of in these neighborhoods.
I think it is I mean, mostly just to answer based on what I've heard, is that it's a look and feel change, right? Of you have a home and next to it is another kind of historic looking home. That's horrible to, renovate. So it's a full tear down job. And then they build up and really changes what a neighbor is looking at, right? That's what I heard the most from folks. And so that's a lot of that has been addressed in the height, in, setbacks, in, kind of requirements for storage, bulk plane, all of that have kind of been addressed at the best we can while also prioritizing housing infill.
I think that's why I would be in favor of keeping all of the, like, feeling like we're addressing the mass and form issue with our setbacks and all of that, but taking away the building footprint requirements, because the building footprint maximums were to address large, single-family McMansions. They weren't intended to address housing more people.
Mhm.
So I would be in favor of not having a maximum for duplexes, personally. May I ask
a quick question? Sorry.
Go ahead, Gabby.
In that planning commission discussion, would that also apply? Because currently the sort of three types of housing allowed in R1 is single family detached duplex, but then also 2-unit townhome. So I would interpret this conversation to be that the building footprint should also not apply to single unit attached like the townhomes.
I think if that's what we agree to, obviously I have one opinion, but my colleagues are thoroughly welcome to have a differing opinion. But I would think if we get to a point where we're not limiting it for duplexes, it doesn't make sense to limit it for the single unit attached townhomes. Yeah. Any other thoughts, comments from previous discussions or more planning commission on kind of scale, form, what we're trying to get at here?
One of the comments was historic charm and integrity. And conformity to the existing neighborhood. I think those were the exact words
Right.
provided.
There's 6 of them already there.
I'm just repeating what was said.
I know, yeah.
And also repeating what was said, I just wanted on the record that during the planning commission, neither Lindsay nor myself stated that 1 was the ultimate number with regards to ADUs. We never said that. It was stated that there could be a compromise and there could be a number that we could come to, but we never stated that there was an absolute. So I want that on the record. Because I saw a lot of emails and text messages flying around today.
I mean, vacation rentals, not ADUs.
Oh, whatever. Yes,
Vacation.
yes, yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Have as many ADUs as you want.
They're used by right everywhere. All right, I want to help guide us through this discussion. You've heard my opinions. I like all of the planning commission conditions except for the restrictions on duplexes, and I like their elimination of the maximum square footage for duplexes. I kind of feel like the most streamlined way to move forward is keep talking through what conditions we like, what do we not like, how do we kind of chip away at how we want to move forward. So yeah, Amy, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess for the planning commission conditions, then if we do remove restrictions for duplexes, then I would want to see that as use subject to review. I wouldn't want it by use by right, just so we can review in case there's a huge duplex or something going in there.
Thanks for that. I guess a question I'd ask Gabby or Lucy is, again, would our lot standards be that check?
What check?
Or is it
Well,
setbacks,
like
you mean?
setbacks.
They
Okay.
would, but if you
Get us
think
out.
about, you
Yeah,
know,
go ahead.
the maximum lot size of R1 is 10,000.
Yeah,
So you could still get a whole lot of structure on there.
yeah, I'm thinking too, if someone had a 10,000 square foot lot, it likely would be on the hillside. This is not infill. Yeah, could we do something where if it's, oh, I hate making things more complicated. Amy, is your suggestion that you still, if you're removing the square footage maximum, then all duplexes in R1 would be used subject to review? Or use subject to review if it's a certain size?
You're on mute.
Sorry, you're on mute.
Yeah, maybe if it's over the 2,500 square footprint, but I would want it use subject to review if it is bigger than that.
I would agree with that. I think that's a reasonable compromise, and I think that actually does address a lot of the concerns that have been brought to us. Allowing it as use by right, subject to review if they're going to take advantage of the ability to build greater than that 2,500 square foot footprint.
Yeah.
We also have the freedom that we could say, I mean, this is our land use code. We can change it how it makes sense. We don't have to stick with, we could have a maximum square footage for single family, and we could have a maximum square footage for a duplex. If builders' feedback was, hey, it really is hard to make a livable space in what turns out to be 5,000 square feet or whatever it is, 2-story, it really should be a maximum of 3,000. We can do that. Was there any feedback on like an ideal number? Again, we're just pulling numbers.
Yeah, that's the feedback is that
waiting for it.
we're just pulling numbers out now. This is a reminder on the yearly check-in.
That's what I like. I like the check.
Because
Annual check-in.
there's a certain extent of unknown variables, something we talked about planning commission as well, is like, it will be very expensive to develop on the hill. And one of the ways to make that affordable for a developer is to put in multiple units. That's just the reality of it. So we want to have housing in town. We want to build more. That's kind of the cost.
Okay, well, let me circle back to the group. Is there I have spoken very strongly. I'm very open to dissension. Is there any strong argument against duplexes in R1 that anybody would like to make?
They conform with the existing historic appeal of the neighborhood. That's my only comment.
How do you want to implement that, Jim?
Boss, Lucy.
I don't know if anyone else can hear that besides me. I think there is still the sense that having a historic looking or design feel of those apartments or whatever we put in. Sorry, not apartments.
Duplex.
Sorry. That was a slip. No, duplexes.
Gloria said that I could use her as an example. Our lovely town administrator lives in a duplex. She lives. I mean, the duplex is what is potentially affordable, and it's efficient, and it's warm, and it's cozy. And you walk by her house and it doesn't look terrible. It doesn't look like it doesn't fit in the neighborhoods. So it sounds like what we're talking about is the look and feel and the size. Is that what we're circling around? I'm seeing nodding. Okay. So it seems like we can move forward to saying duplexes are used by right in R1. Going once, going twice. I'm not hearing strong dissension to that, but I'm hearing conversation around scale.
Look, feel, scale, conformity, parking.
Yes,
Parking
but
is-
we are not, what I worry about is we're starting to layer on a variety of contingencies in neighborhoods that we don't have an overlay of contingencies for.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And all I'm doing is conveying what was said the other night.
But now you get to be.
Oh, yeah, no, I get to be the conveyor.
Decide. Now you get to decide.
You said you were the decider.
No, I am one member of 7. You get to decide. Okay, so moving back to size, is that what we're settling on? The compromise maybe is we try this 2,500 and we see how it works for a year. I don't know, other suggestions?
I was still in the category of allowing duplexes to be able to be I think conditional use over 25.
Over 25.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Go ahead, Amy. Yeah, you're agreeing. So it sounds like there's agreement on use by right if it's same maximum square footage as what we have for single family, but use subject to review for special use permit if it's over that maximum square footage. I see Amy nodding. That's what Lindsay's thinking. Tyler, Ron, you guys have thoughts here?
No, not on that current topic.
Okay. Carl? the company?
I feel that's a great place to start, and that will allow us to, protect against anything super crazy happening while we can figure out, really what is it that people are trying to build that would be bigger than that, and how can we make it happen in a way that's consistent with the character of the town.
Right?
I like it.
Okay. Is that clear enough to Gabby, Lucy, Gloria?
I think Ron unmuted.
Oh, Ron, did you have something to
I
add?
like to use subject to review. That way we can kind of take a look at things and see if it's going in the direction we think it should.
Okay, great. So it sounds like consensus on use by right with this certain size, use subject to review if it's over a certain size.
And that's a 2,500.
2,500 square foot footprint.
Yep. And then in the motion, we'll just want to, or in the condition, we'll just want to note that we are talking about duplexes and 2 single unit attached townhomes.
Yeah. Okay, so that's that condition. Were there any other conditions from the planning commission? Because I think that's a starting point that any board members wanted to reject or discuss, or any conditions that board members wanted to bring up. Yeah, go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, and maybe Jim or Lindsay could shed some light on this. I understand removing the maximum disturbance provisions from the slope hazard area development after reading Travis Moore's letter, and then Lisa Adair also chimed in on that. It didn't sound like it was really feasible, or even it didn't make any sense. But why are we, I guess my question is for the next one, why was the special use permit for development on slopes 30% or greater? I guess why was it taken out? Is it just because 25% you already have to have it engineered, and so it'll be engineered for 30%, and was that difference there in the beginning because 30% does create more issues?
I can speak to a little bit of this and then I'll
Thank you.
back to staff, but a prior draft had development in areas of 30% or more completely prohibited. And so we had heard that was not a good idea, and that would preclude a lot of development. So that was kind of the next step of saying, well, if you are going to develop, it needs a special use permit. But as for the planning commission discussion, I'll let you all speak to that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Lucy. I'm pretty sure. Okay, I think I can get this right. Okay. Tyler was right, on track there, because they already had to submit an engineering study over 25%, that it can be administratively approved and not have to go to a special use permit. Kind of the theory was there, if they can build it, they can do it on over 25%.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, so in the code, what we have drafted right now is that if if the average of your property slope is between 25 and 29%, it can be reviewed administratively. And then over 30%, like Gabby was saying, instead of saying it's not allowed, we just changed it to require a special use permit. And so we gave the planning commission a few options based on feedback from the planning commission that they kind of wanted to make the process similar for any grade over 25%. So to kind of combine the processes for a grade between 25 and 29, and then a grade over 30%. And so we gave them a few options, including, make all slope hazard area development permits a special use permit. That was one option. Another option was to not require a special use permit for development on slopes 30% or greater. So essentially to make all slope hazard area development permits an administrative review. And so that is the option that they went with, and that's why that condition was included. So with that context, you can, agree with that, or if you want to discuss.
Well, and the only thing I'm wondering is, we're moving from not allowed at all to administrative review. And that just seems like kind of a big jump. And I'm wondering if, I guess we're comfortable with that. I imagine there was some reason that people weren't allowed to build on 30% or greater before. I understand now that we do have limited property, but I guess, are we comfortable with, the engineering being done for 25% or greater? It's all the same. That's just the threshold, and we're happy with administrative review on that.
Thanks, Tyler. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, no, Tyler, that's a great point. One of the comments that was made was with regards to the technology and where we are today and allowing these structures to be completed. And instead of saying a flat no, we're saying, yeah, maybe bring it to us and let's see what we can do. So this is a good thing.
Okay.
And does it harken back to kind of our conversation previously about 2,500 square feet or 3,000 square feet, that a little bit of these numbers are kind of arbitrary? It's not like this is best practice out there that 30% or greater is treated this way, right? Like it's a little bit arbitrary when it comes to slope.
Yeah. In this case, you could say that there are some communities that do not allow development over 30%. While DOLA just came out with their kind of template standards for development, and their standards require just special engineering studies on any slope over 25%.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. I think you guys are, I think the town is on the edge of change, is what you're seeing. Historically, we did write it for communities across Colorado that over 30% you can't build. Wyoming, Montana, we've done that across the Intermountain West, but we are seeing changes in how we understand that development. And we heard good feedback from inside the community that this is something that there's a comfort level with. So it's likely that while you guys are at this place of, okay, we're going to let it go over 25, we want to look at it, other communities may well follow you in the next few years. So it's just one of those places where a standard was kind of historically in place, and now the engineering community is looking at it saying, I don't think so. I don't think we need to hold to that no anymore. We can look at this a little differently. So you guys are kind of stepping out into that space. I think that will be a little more common as we go forward.
And my final thought on that was also, it's going to be really important to make sure that we're adhering then to the avalanche map, because as we know, in San Juan County, 30 degrees, actually, it's not even 30 degrees, we get avalanches on 27 degrees. So I think it'll be important, if we do allow building on that we're adhering to the avalanche hazard map as well. Thank you for the explanation.
Thanks, Tyler.
I'll also add that another one of those conditions being the ability for the town administrator to push up administrative decisions to planning commission could also apply to slope hazard as an administrative decision. So should there be a particularly, potentially impactful property, staff has that ability as well through that condition.
Thanks, Gabby. And I think what's helpful for the community to remember is that I see it as a benefit that in the land use code, we've moved more processes to be administratively approved, because it basically means if you've checked all the boxes, because now the boxes are very clear about what you have to check, and we have advanced engineering, we have advanced geotechnical, we have advanced abilities to say, can the structure exist or not? it doesn't mean that whoever's in town hall at whatever year or decade just gets to decide what they like. It means that someone has gone through the process, met the standards, met the requirements, and it doesn't need more complicated, in-depth board review or notification or et cetera. So it makes it more transparent and predictable for the applicant. And I think we just can kind of have things move more straightforward when we have this administrative review. But just for the community to know, this is not just whoever's at town hall gets to decide what they like and don't like. It's not quite how it works.
And to bump up the avalanche or the like new study for a new map for the avalanche hazard zone from the planning commission. It's actually funny that the gentleman on Fifth and Green joined because that was kind of a tough decision for the planning commission because the line itself on the map is like what, 40 feet or something?
Yeah,
So
big swath.
yeah, so he has to develop, or he had to build a certain type of way because the map itself was like drawn with a thick marker instead of
Right.
modern technology. So
Right.
that is a priority and that I would want to push to the board.
Maybe something to talk about at our trustee retreat. Put on our priorities list. Okay, yeah, smaller markers.
Smaller
Jim.
markers.
Smaller markers. It would save the world.
Fine.
I think is the 98 map of what we're going off of, so.
Okay, are there other, the conditions that the planning commission had are on page 27 of our packet. I know Gabby had them. I just want to kind of move us through kind of, specifically so we can know what we are and aren't making a motion on. So the first condition was allow single unit attached dwellings with 3 or more units, triplex, fourplex, multi-units in the C1 district to be built to a height of 35 feet. Is there any strong opposition to that condition? Again, kind of saying if you're building a multi-unit, housing more people, you can be 5 feet taller in C1. Anyone arguing against that?
No.
Okay, now let's talk about the vacation rental limits or not limits in the MU1 district. So, yeah, go ahead, discuss.
Well, my question to you is, didn't come as one that you disagreed with. Like, what's your reasoning there?
Well, I think we have a couple things going on with vacation rentals in at least the history that I've been in this community. One, vacation rentals, because they command a higher profit, can often turn out long-term rentals, right? I think we also see in some communities, so we're trying to protect against that. And I saw the previous board try to do this, the board I was on, by limiting number of permits. And I think there's been general community satisfaction with how that's been managed. But it's not currently limited in BP. Right? BP can have as many as they want, just like we wouldn't say you can only have 3 hotels or you can only have whatever, but we limit the number of licenses in the different districts. And I've heard overall pretty positive feedback about that. Even people I know that love Airbnbs or run them or whatever, general positive feedback about limiting the licenses. And then I think what this was trying to get at is what has happened in some other communities where you have kind of outside commercial entities that buy up a bunch of residential properties and really change the character and feel of the neighborhood. Some outside property management company that has 15 and it's really changing the nature of that community. And so it seems like that's what this was trying to get at. I agree with the arguments that we don't need to change this for MU1, that like we could treat it the same way we do with BP. If you want to get really radical, my husband has a proposal that we should auction off Airbnb licenses. That's what we should do, because then you know the real price of them. To set it up like an auction.
The economist.
Yes. But I think I understand the argument that says this is a commercial area. We don't limit number of uses or number of types of things in this commercial area anyways. And I'm not totally convinced that this, that we'd have, I think limiting it in the residential or the other areas kind of accomplishes what I think our goal is. But I don't know, that was the only reason why I kind of thought.
And sorry, can I just clarify one thing? And I may have misunderstood you, but currently our code does limit in all districts, vacation rental, permits to one per individual.
Right.
Mm.
We don't have limits on the number of vacation rentals
Right.
allowed
Right,
in what is currently BP.
right.
Yes. Mhm. Yeah, and I don't know, was there any historic discussion about why that language was in our previous code? Like what you're saying is this current language doesn't depart from what we used to do.
Right.
Maybe just people think it does.
Yeah, I mean, I could guess at the intent of that, but I was not there when this was passed, so I don't think I should be the one to speak to it. I don't know if any of you want to speak to it.
Or speak to your opinions on what we should or shouldn't allow in anyone.
I think we discussed this one a lot. The original intent from previous boards and being on these little public-private commissions is, again, the integrity of the community, not over commercializing it. And I understand there's been a conversations and debate about you can own however many you want, you can do with whatever you want. But are we doing what's best for the community while saying you can do that? It's a fundamental question.
Well, and I think, something important here is like, I really appreciated Mr. Austin's comments, but he made a statement that like, for example, you can own as many bars as you would like. And I think the important difference here is that a bar is not a place that a resident could live. And like, that's the important difference here. And it does deserve slightly different consideration. I can't say that I have a strong opinion on this personally. I think that there are a lot of strong arguments on both sides, but I do think it's good that we're considering it separately because it's not the same as other businesses.
Thanks for that, Carl.
And this is a tricky one. We discussed the tax implications. How these entities are being taxed, because they're technically commercial, but some are being taxed as commercial, others residential, so it's whole issue there.
I did some research after our chat. And I think towns across Colorado are sort of struggling with this issue, right? Of like, how many vacation rentals do we allow in our towns that have very limited housing stock? And I mean, we're about to try to infill as much as we can. I tend to fall on the side of limiting the number of rentals per owner. But communities like in Steamboat, Aspen, Breckenridge, Frisco, Silverthorne, Pitkin County are all limiting in some way. People owning multiple, how many days, like this is just a continual problem in Colorado. And then I looked up the bills from the last session on the state was considering legislating, how do we tax? And the comment from the sponsor was these should be, brought back to the community for discussion and consideration. So we don't get a lot of instruction from the state on how they want to regulate it. So it is sort of up to us.
But the state does recognize as an issue.
Right. They recognize it's an issue and then are saying, let local communities decide. So that's sort of where we're at, because that was also a conversation of, well, the state couldn't decide, so we'll leave it at that. And I think this is a place of like protecting the town from what it could be. Could it be like that version of Telluride where there are bunch of vacation rentals in areas where people used to live? So I hear the arguments. I'm not wanting to limit in commercial districts. This usage is slightly commercial, but also slightly residential as people are in and out. And I see in the master plan, read it over and over again, biggest issue is housing. We had this really tough conversation of we're basically trying to make a decision right now of like allowing commercial activity and like boosting the economy of the town, or kind of allowing for, more uses for residential structures. So like that balance is really, really challenging.
But one way we get at that is like, I was looking back through the use table and, we don't allow like single family homes to be built anymore in an MU1. Is that right? Am I right? Like,
Yeah.
we're incentivizing new builds to be commercial, and that's probably a good thing. And so we're in all these different ways, we're kind of trying to strike all these balances. And so I hear that argument, Keith and I were just talking about this about like, well, you have there's not a lot of Green Street that is residential or Blair Street or MU1 area. But at the same time, there are it's probably some of our highest density apartment units above commercial.
Yeah.
And if those are all vacation rentals with very few limits.
And there are
Those are
single
the-
family homes there.
Yeah.
And those people live there now, and if they move.
Live above their business.
Yeah. There are still people who live in M1, in the new MU1, yeah.
Yeah.
I also looked up, this is an interesting number. So in Summit County in 2014, there were 635 vacation rentals. At the end of 2023, there were 10,425.
Wait, how many years?
Between 2014 and 2023. The population of Summit County is 30,000 people. So I just this is a problem that's bigger than this town of what does Colorado mountain towns start to look like.
And we've said all along with the master plan, it's about change is gonna happen no matter what. And it's about us being intentional as much as we can about what that change looks like. I don't want to forget our online colleagues, Amy, Tyler, Ron, go ahead.
Yeah, I do struggle with this issue. I tend to lean on the side of regulating Airbnbs, vacation rentals, keeping it one per owner, but I do see the argument. We got a ton of public comment today on the opposition. And again, it's what if could happen. I just would hate to see one developer buying up a bunch of properties and they're all Airbnbs, and then we allowed that. So I guess I lean more on the side of regulation. And again, we can look back at this in a year, and if something needs to change, it can. But again, I don't have a super strong opinion on it. I just lean a little more towards the side of regulating Airbnbs.
Tyler, anything to add that you wanted to speak up on this?
Yeah, I think, somebody pointed out that a lot of the units in what is going to become MU1 are, a lot of these places that are above commercial businesses. A lot of them are used for employee housing for people that maybe work in that business, and it is higher density. And, I think if each one of those units could be turned into vacation rentals, that would create even more of a housing crisis for workforce housing and for other people. And it is where a lot of our smaller rental units are currently. There are more than you might expect in that area. So I do understand several of the arguments about how it's commercial and people should have the freedom to do what they want in those areas. But also, one of the biggest mandates I feel like that we've gotten is to focus on affordable housing and workforce housing, and trying to reconcile those two things is difficult. But I think it might behoove us to continue to limit the amount of vacation rentals per person, at least until we can revisit this.
Lucy, let me ask you a clarifying question. Okay, so just to be clear, what is currently proposed in terms of limiting to one entity or owner is the same as our previous code?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so it's not a departure. And we're not changing the limitations on the number of licenses in MU1. We're just limiting the number that an individual or an entity can have.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so then the second question I have, not to muddy the waters, is If, how easy is it for someone to get around this? Are we creating a structure in which the average individual person who's not gonna go file a bunch of LLCs and pay all those fees and whatever is limited? But this mysterious entity that we're trying to regulate against, that will change the nature of our community, is very able to go file a bunch of LLCs and have a bunch of units.
Let me.
That's one of my big concerns around this, is just that it seems like a good idea in theory, but I think that the practical application might be very complex / easily avoidable by those with not even a super substantial resources, but you know, the motivation to make it happen. And I think that when there's a big gap between, you know, theory and practice, then maybe we have to revisit the theory.
As in like how it's written?
Just the idea of you know, enforcing it. Yeah, you know, as written or in a similar form to how it's written. You know, I can't imagine an easy edit that would fix that, basically.
Would be yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like we all know in our mind what we're trying to regulate for or against. And it kind of goes back to the building maximum footage, is sort of like, well, what does that actually look like to do that? Yeah.
Gabby, do you have that language in front of you? Sorry, I'm trying to find it right now.
And maybe while you find that, I think it's just the thing that stands out to me is that based on the variety of comments that we've gotten, it just strikes me that there is not a lot of community awareness that this is our current code, which makes me think that the implementation in practice in town is different than what the intention is in the code already.
Well, my question on like, I guess, so I hear you of like, you know, you could create multiple entities and have multiple units. Would that stop us from creating a regulation?
No, I think it's a question of like, well, when I think of a good policy, I think of, well, what are we trying to promote or prevent or protect? And does the policy do that?
Per person.
I just pulled up the
Yeah.
proposed language, and so we did address the LLC entity concern here.
Yeah.
We did get a lot of public comment. I want to like acknowledge that, you know, there was definitely an organized effort there. So, you know, I also think there's a lot of, that we are in the weeds here. And we also got a lot of public comment at the planning commission hearing in November. That was around protecting residents of Silverton and figuring out a way to write the code for the people. And so, you know, want to acknowledge that as well.
Yeah. And the fact that what we're dealing with right now is that we don't really have the instance of some nebulous outside big developer that has all these, we are still talking about friends and neighbors and people we know that would like to have several Airbnbs. That's what we're talking about. So that's why this is hard and there's differences of opinions. So legislating for where we want to go, legislating for where we are. So it sounds like the recommendation, but as stated by my two colleagues, it was not totally unanimous, was to allow individual owners to operate multiple vacation rentals in MU1. That's the condition presented by the planning commission. I'm trying to get a sense of the consensus on whether we would like to accept that condition or reject it.
I would move to reject.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay.
Me as well.
Amy. Okay.
Reject.
Okay. All right. I'm
I
hearing.
would-
Go ahead, Tyler.
I would reject it.
And I heard Ron. And maybe we can work with staff to start making a note of the specific things that we think we want to review in a year or 18 months. And this might be one of them.
Yeah. And we can review it in a year. And again, to state, this is how the code is currently written, correct?
Correct.
Yes. So it's not, we're not changing anything.
Correct. And again, this is one potential way that housing stock changes. It's type.
Encouraging residential units instead of heavy rentals.
And I hear we don't have enough beds in town, so maybe we need some more hotels. That's what I heard. That was your argument. Okay, all right, so moving on to condition 3, I think we hit that pretty well. Did anybody need more clarification on the conditions related to the slope hazard? Okay, the recommended condition number 6, which was the avalanche hazard map, to just reference the most recently updated avalanche map instead of like the specific 2005, 98, etc. No worries there. And again, we'll move on to the kind of 4 initiatives below. Number 7, exempt all construction in the MU1 from the small lot bulk plan limitations. I thought Gabby's explanation was helpful. Was there any real opposition to that condition? Okay, and then number 8. Number 8, this is like procedural for who's on the board.
Was good.
Fine, okay, any concerns there?
Nope.
And then again, the staff suggestion or request that the town administrator could refer up to the planning commission.
It was a good
Ask for
addition.
help when you need it.
It's a good addition.
And then number 10, it sounds like where we settled on was the condition. We don't want to add the number 3 condition, right? So currently the code says duplexes are used by right in R1. So we're not adding that, but we would add a condition. So we're kind of flip-flopping what the planning commission has suggested. We're coming to a different conclusion, where we would keep the max, no, we would, we're gonna need help in phrasing this when we get to this condition. It sounds like the condition was there's no maximum building footprint restriction for duplexes if it's under 2,500 square feet. But if it's over, then it would require a special permit.
Do you want me to suggest language based on that synopsis? To require a special use permit for duplexes and single unit attached units of 2 that are over 200 or 2,500 square feet.
Great, thank you. So when we get to there, we can have that. And then, okay, so those were the conditions from the planning commission. Any other comments on those? Okay, were there any conditions that any of the board members wanted to bring up or add?
I have some spice
Great.
to add to sauce at
Great.
9:30.
That's what this is to your coordination, Lindsay. Add away.
One thing that was briefly brought up at the planning commission, but we did not have the ability to address it, not ability, we just did not address it. Was that in R2, so the mixed residential, so that's like mineral, cement, there is no max square footage. So we see a place here of addressing Mr. Barney's comment around what kind of homes you want to develop. That was some spice to the sauce. I would argue that we should also, if we're going to be limiting R1 size and limitation, to also limit R2.
Thanks for that suggestion, trustee. Discussion?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But what would be limited to? What would be the number?
I would argue the same across the board. If R1 is 2,500 square feet, R2 should also be 2,500 square feet.
For all housing types.
Well, R2, this, again, this is where we have to get in. We're trying to create a policy around large single family homes.
Yeah.
So what gets us there?
So I think I would make the suggestion to adopt a similar of use or special use permit for duplexes and multifamily. Is that what you were trying to get at, Lucy?
Just that, once we get into more units, those buildings are gonna be much larger.
Yeah.
So this becomes, putting, adding restrictions onto, a threeplex, a fourplex.
Yeah.
On up, townhomes, cottage core dwellings, et cetera.
I would strongly argue against it for any multi-unit duplex or above.
Yeah.
I think we have an
Okay.
intention of R2 being
Mhm.
housing more people. We're trying to house more people. But I can understand the argument for single family.
Mhm.
I'm suspicious that because of the type of lots that are there, like the hillside, you have property owners who own large areas where you could very easily see a large home going in, where most of these are not quite the same lot ownership size.
Yeah.
So it's probably less likely, but I don't see any problem doing it, but I would be opposed to adding restrictions for.
Multi-unit, I think that my intent here is to avoid building the large, single family kind of McMansions that keep getting referred to over and over again. Even if they aren't on the hillside, there are still some vacant-ish lots over there that can be pretty large.
Yeah. So can we put that in there then for single family houses in R2? 2,500 square foot?
Again, building footprint.
Footprint.
That doesn't mean total building square foot.
That's still a huge
That's
house.
big.
Gabby, Lucy, Elizabeth, does this feel like it's implementable while still keeping the character of R2 and the ease and incentive of building multi-units in R2?
Sorry, just to clarify, you are suggesting adding a maximum building footprint of 2,500 square feet for single family dwellings only in R2.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay,
Thoughts?
we can implement that for sure.
You can tell that this community is really worried about something. That's what you can tell.
I think we should be though.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree.
Yeah.
I do not disagree.
I think that we are in a lucky place in this community where that hasn't we are not at the place of other mountain towns yet.
So if you guys are asking, can you add that standard to an R2 district and use it? The answer is yes. So you can separate out the single unit detached and treat the footprint of that differently than you treat. There's no rule that says everybody has to have the same footprint maximum. So you're good to go if that's how you want to approach it for that particular unit type.
Thank you. That's a very different. Well, and it also might mean that, again, maybe it creates more incentive that R2, you want to build a bigger unit, it gets to be duplex. Yay for you. Okay, was there any other board opposition to that proposal? Nope. Okay, any other spicy conditions? Or mundane conditions? We'll also take those. Okay, this is your last chance until we revisit this in a year.
Well, do we do one more reading?
One more reading.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Not your last chance, your second to last chance.
Yep.
Okay, is the board okay with conditions? Do we seem like we're getting to where we want to be, and can we move on to these initiatives? Yeah, go ahead, Tyler.
I have one more thing, and I think we should just bring this up. And I forgot, forgive me, I should have done it earlier, but this is in response to one of the public comments we received here during this meeting. Was the rezoning of the properties between 5th and 6th from BP to R2 and how it's going to affect those folks are, since the surrounding area is still zoned BP or MU1, it sounds like, and after looking at the map, it seems to be accurate. Should we consider leaving that MU1 or BP, whichever it's going to be, so those folks don't lose their property rights? It's a very valid concern.
That is a valid concern. I did clarify earlier and maybe it was garbled. With
Okay,
but they would not be losing their property rights. As far as like, we're talking about Cody's business would be able to
Right.
continue being his business. And if it was sold, that person could apply to still have that business if they wanted to.
okay,
But if it was like destroyed and maybe they didn't want that, residential would fit better in that spot.
okay.
Yeah.
Forgive me, I just must have missed that earlier in the meeting. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, and just one more thing to clarify, if that's okay. Alternatively, if we do rezone that area, or if we do keep that area zoned as BP, if they're, if one of those buildings burns down or it's destroyed, they will not be able to rebuild a single family dwelling.
Yeah.
Why we made the recommendation to rezone
Okay.
that to residential, because that conforms with what's currently there.
Yeah, like we're looking at what that law, it's kind of the same discussion we had when we looked at zoning the plats at the entrance to town with Mineral Creek, because that could have been business pedestrian. And that's what was proposed, but the discussion with community members and neighbors and else was like, well, this is really kind of residential. People are not walking down from Green Street. It doesn't have sidewalks. Those units of homes are very much kind of residential backing up to the street. So thanks, Lucy, for that clarification. Yeah. And apologies again for any of those listening when the sound was not great. Okay, any other conditions anybody would like to add? Okay, let's move on to the initiatives. I thought this was really insightful, helpful direction. I know we don't need this for a motion, but I just want to kind of tie this all up before we move into a motion and move on. Were there any other initiatives on here? Or any comments on these initiatives? This is on page 28 of the packet that the planning commission had recommended or that staff wants to add further details on. Do you guys like these kind of things we need to work on next?
I do.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Did staff have any comments or feedback on these kind of directions, or is this something that again, and then once we're through the procedural part of the land use code, then we can have a conversation, say, okay, now like next step for land use work.
We don't have any additional comments on them. I would say that during the planning commission, Lucy did help kind of come up with, maybe that doesn't fit there, maybe it fits as a condition, so we did help kind of guide them along these.
Thank you. Okay, well, I think we've had a lot of great discussion. I think I sense that we're moving towards some sort of emotion with a variety of conditions. I think someone's gonna have to be brave and reframe whatever conditions that we think we've settled on, or step out there and make some motions unless there's any further comment.
Lucy, could you read back to me one that we were working on? Sorry.
Yeah, so the two that you guys added, and I have them all written down. I can share them if you want. I just have to hop off, but it would be the first one was require a special use permit for duplexes and single unit attached 2 units, townhomes over 500 square feet. Or sorry, over 2,500 square feet.
You know what, Lucy, I'm just gonna request. Yeah. For formality's sake, if you don't mind sharing it.
Yeah.
I think it would just make this let's follow a good process where everybody's very clear about what they're motioning and what conditions they're moving. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I just have to join.
Again, there's no direction to anybody to approve any particular condition, but it can all be in front of whoever would like to.
No, it's great.
Make it.
Visual is better.
Yes. This is a formal process and we want it to be done well. And again, I hope the community sees after all this that there's been a lot of intentionality put into all of this. We're not going to get it perfect. We'll revisit it, but this has gotten us a lot farther than we've been. And maybe while we're doing that, Gloria, would you be able to listen? So we're going to have the first reading today with these conditions. And then there'll be a second reading in
On the 27th,
27.
our next meeting.
Thanks. And then it would be considered enacted then.
No, it takes 30 days after the second reading to be enacted.
Okay, great, thanks. So any applications up until that point would follow the current code.
Yeah, our code.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we'll scroll down. There is.
Yeah, I know.
Oh,
You might
man.
have to make it bigger, much right.
Actually, this is the wrong one. I have a lot of tabs open.
At the next meeting, there's still an opportunity to make changes or edits if further public comment.
We've scheduled both to be public hearings.
Great.
Which is kind of atypical. We don't normally do that for our ordinances. As you'll notice on our agenda, there is a first reading. It's not a public hearing, but the second reading will be a public hearing. So this one is 2 public hearings.
Lots of opportunities to engage. Thanks, Lucy.
Yeah.
Or to fit it all on one screen.
I have also seen people in this meeting go up to the screen to make their motions. That's also happened. It's benefit.
Okay, are we feeling, I will get up there and do it, but I'm not gonna get up there. Someone's gonna have anything more to say.
Before you get up.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't think that my comment is about this particularly. It is more with regards to coming back in 12 months or 18 months. I don't know which we decided on or if it was decided. Is that gonna be every 12 months for the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? Because it can't be in perpetuity. Is it just gonna be a one-time thing in 12 months? Am I overanalyzing this? I'm thinking.
What do you think?
Well, I was thinking like once annually for the next 3 years. I think by that time, we should have a really good grasp on what this is that?
I think that's a great suggestion. I think because if we just said in a year, I think based on when this is getting adopted and our building period and cycle, a year,
Yeah.
I don't think we'll have as much information as we'd like in
Yeah,
a
this
year.
gives us enough, okay.
And so I think it'd be a question for staff of like, knowing that the board would like to see how this plays out. What I'm hearing from the board is that we'd like to see how this plays out for applicants and staff and town character and people and all that. And so maybe I would suggest we get staff recommendation on when you think, should we do our first review in 2 building seasons? Should we do our first review in 18 months? Should we do our first review in 12 months? But maybe we're saying, hey, the board would like to have like 2 building cycle reviews of this. And maybe staff could recommend what that typically might look like. Was that helpful?
Sure.
That's what I hear you saying. Not in perpetuity, but a couple rounds.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, that's not a condition.
No, that's just
Okay.
more of a, that's why I said it. Okay.
All right, last time colleagues online, Lindsay's going to make a motion with some conditions. Any other comments of where we're ending up?
Do you want to go through these and make sure they're what you all agree on one more time, or do you?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Do the motion?
Great. So the first condition is allow single unit attached dwellings with 3 or more units, triplex, fourplex dwellings and multi-unit dwellings in C1 district to be built to height of 35 feet. Second condition is remove maximum disturbance provision for slope hazard area development. Third condition is do not require a special use permit for development on slopes 30% or greater. Fourth is replace the avalanche hazard map reference from a specific study to the language identified in the town's most recently updated avalanche mapping study. Fifth is exempt all construction in the MU1 currently BP from the small lot bulk plan limitations. Sixth is amend section 615.810A of the land use code to specify that the San Juan Regional Planning Commission shall consist of the members from the Board of Trustees, 1 member for the Board of County Commissioners, and 4 at-large members appointed by the Planning Commission. 7 is add a new section 15-8-28 that allows for the town administrator to refer any administrative decisions to the Planning Commission. 8 is require a special use permit for duplex and single unit attached dwellings with 2 units with a building footprint over 2,500 square feet. Thank you, Lucy. Implement a maximum building footprint of 2,500 square feet for single family dwellings in R2. Does that sound like the right?
Which would match
conditions?
R1.
Which would match
Yeah.
R1.
Okay.
Based on that, any members online have anything on those conditions or any board members here? Right, and you can also make a motion like with the conditions.
Yeah, why don't I just do 1 through 9? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well then that makes it easier. We'll move this along. So I move to recommend approval of ordinance 2501, an ordinance for the town of Silverton repealing and readopting the land use code and amending the official zoning map and incorporating the proposed revisions in attached B addendum to the adoption draft with the following conditions 1 through 9.
As written.
As read and written.
Second.
Roll call, please, Melina?
Trustee Halverson,
Yes.
trustee Wakefield,
Yes.
trustee Schnitger,
Yes.
trustee Gardner,
Yes.
trustee George,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harper,
Yes.
Mayor Cranker.
Yes. Thanks, team.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. I feel like we should give you a bottle of champagne. I brought some chocolate.
That was the second reading.
Okay, okay. We need to cut a ribbon or something on it. Gabby, Elizabeth, thank you so much. Yeah, come visit anytime.
We will.
Yeah. We appreciate all the work. Staff, thank you so much. This has been a long time coming. Board, good work. Great consensus building, compromise. Way to go. All right, I don't want to belabor it, so I will move us on to 4B, public hearing, resolution 2024-30, a resolution appropriating additional sums of money to defray expenses in excess of amounts budgeted for the town of Silverton, Colorado.
Okay, this is really boring compared to what we. But typically we are not finished with our actuals for the previous month until the end of the next month. So in evaluating our November actuals, it became apparent that we would be over in expenses in our sewer and refuse accounts. The sewer account is over because we received a USDA loan that was not budgeted in 2024, and we spent more than we budgeted, but this is offset by the revenue from that loan. And the refuse expense is over because Bruin raised our contract in April by 9.9%. And I did not budget for this increase. And that is something I plan on doing in future years to try and keep us above water in that fund.
Above water.
Oh no, this is the refuse.
Potential. To me, this just further highlights our need for thinking about refuse. Like, if it continues to go up 9 to 10% every single year, that is not sustainable for all of us. So, we all know this. 2025.
Yeah.
Any other questions on those funds?
So we have a resolution, 2024-30,
On page 304.
for approval that will then be submitted to the state as our supplemental budget for 2024 for those two funds.
Make a motion to adopt resolution 2024-30, a resolution appropriating additional sums of money to defray expenses in excess of amounts budgeted for the town of Silverton, Colorado.
Second.
All right, roll call, please.
Trustee Halverson,
Yes.
trustee Wakefield,
Yes.
trustee Schneider,
Yes.
trustee Gardner,
Yes.
trustee George,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harper.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. All right, agenda item 4C, intergovernmental agreement for the reaffirmation of the unified emergency management between San Juan County and the town of Silverton.
So an interesting thing, if you pick up your CML book, you'll find that there's a state of the towns survey that they did, and 80% of town and counties actually have a unified emergency management system. So this is a very common system. And this is a renewal from 2021. There is an accompanying emergency operations plan mentioned in there. I can provide that. It was updated with a few edits. They're not substantial for town, but I didn't want to add to a 400-page packet some more stuff. So if you would like a copy of that, it is on our website. It is on the county's website, and you can review it there.
Our PDF readers, thanks.
Was that a dig about no one picking up their mail?
Yeah, everybody pick up your mail.
Page
I'll
306.
make a,
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve the updated intergovernmental agreement for the reaffirmation of the unified emergency management between San Juan County and the town of Silverton.
Second.
Trustee Halverson,
Yes.
trustee Wakefield,
Yes.
trustee Schneider,
Yes.
trustee Gardner,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Pro Tem Harper,
Yes.
Franker.
Yes.
Endless, the chocolates.
All right, moving on to 4D, resolution 2025-01, a resolution authorizing the town of Silverton to transfer their conservation trust fund account to Colorado Trust.
And so, as I've been working with our accountants and looking at our funds, we realized that we're not getting interest as much as we'd like on our, conservation trust fund. Colorado Trust is a government is designed for government entities, and has, a 5% interest rate, that we could be harnessing more interest. This was approved by the Finance Committee and recommended approval to you all.
I make a motion to adopt resolution 2025-01, a resolution authorizing the town of Silverton to transfer their conservation trust fund account to Colo Trust.
Colorado Trust, yeah.
Second.
Thanks, Amy. Roll call, please.
Trustee Halverson,
Yes.
trustee Wakefield,
Yes.
trustee Schneider,
Yes.
trustee Gardner,
Yes.
trustee George,
Yes.
Pro Tem Harper,
Yes.
Mayor Franker.
Yes. All right, we're getting there, guys. 4E, first reading of ordinance 2025-01. An ordinance amending, no, O2. It is O2.
Yes, this
All right.
one will be O2.
First reading of ordinance 2025-02, an ordinance amending chapter 13, article 1, water and sewer of the Silverton Municipal Code to establish the application of unit utilities and service charges for accessory dwelling units.
And this section was taken out of our land use code, because we had utility information in our land use code that didn't belong there. We're putting this into chapter 13. So there'll be a couple of these coming your way.
And again, this isn't a change from what we previously did. We're just moving it in structure.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, John. Well,
Great.
and BQRs, sorry.
Yeah, my video's not working, but at least you can hear me this time. Okay, during the land use code rewrite, we identified a part of that chapter that addressed ADU water and sewer tap logistics and billing for ADUs that really belonged in chapter 13, which specifically deals with related water and sewer subjects. So we wanted to move it to chapter 13. Additionally, the resolution that was passed regarding the EQRs also directly pertains to the language of the code. So staff is proposing the new language, which is the ordinance in your packet, and to move that to chapter 13 where it logically goes. So to me, this is really just a housekeeping item with the code. And so this language no longer exists in the land use code, so we definitely need it. But we wanted to wait until the EQRs were passed so that we could roll that in with ADUs, because ADUs definitely apply to the spirit of our EQR resolution. Housekeeping. Any
Thanks.
questions?
I had a question, might be more for Clay on page 315. So we have the ordinance and the first part all makes sense. It seems related to ADUs, the second part. But then we get to the third paragraph and it says, whereas the town of Silverton Board of Trustees recognizes the cost of living increase and strain on the senior resident population. And whereas the town of Silverton Board of Trustees desires to establish a discount utility program for seniors who are the primary full-time resident and owner of the property being charged with the utility. Those two paragraphs seemed out of place here. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's part of the chapter here, but I was confused about how we were referencing ADU billing and then we were referencing senior discounts.
Well, I think that's just a mistake that comes from, using language from previous resolutions for that one.
Okay, gotcha.
So we previously did a discount on utility, and typically these resolutions are the whereas clauses are defaulted to areas of the statute that refer to utilities, and so that looks like that's just a Scrivener's error.
Okay,
I'll take the blame.
Okay, gotcha. Thanks for clarifying. So we could still pass the ordinance, and then whoever's making the motion, do they need to make a note with administrative edits?
Yeah, I would just pass it with the edit. I don't think it's substantive. It needs to get reread or redrafted or anything like that. It doesn't change the substance of the ordinance. It's the whereas clauses.
Yeah.
So I would just make the motion note to strike through those two clauses that are irrelevant.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying. Any trustee discussion on? Good catch.
So you just want a motion as read and then strike whereas in the second or in the third paragraph and the fourth.
I think that'll work.
All right. Make a motion to adopt ordinance 2025-02, an ordinance amending chapter 13, article 1, water and sewer of Silverton Municipal Code to establish application of unit utilities and service charges for accessory dwelling units and striking the third paragraph, whereas the town of Silverton Board Trustees recognize the cost of living increase and strain on seniors, and striking whereas the town of Silverton Board of Trustees desires to establish a discounted utility program for seniors who are primary full-time residents and owners of the property being charged with utility.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Trustee Harberson? Yes. Trustee Wakefield?
Yes.
Trustee Schenker?
Yes.
Trustee Gardner?
Yes.
Trustee George?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harper?
Yes.
Mayor Craig?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, guys. All right, consent agenda, number 5.
And we do have 3 event notices. 4? Is it 3 or 4?
3.
It's
3.
3 event notices on there, snowscapes, skijoring, and the ski team fun race.
Brought my candy
Exciting.
to be thematic for snowscapes.
Candy land.
Land.
Candy.
Yep, this year's theme is Candyland, and Anna's on if you all have any questions about those.
I also know people are asking about enterprise funds. Our financials are right here in the consent agenda. And we often talk about our enterprise funds at the town hall budget discussion. So if you didn't catch that, you can check it out on the website and on YouTube. Thanks for the applications, Anna. Very exciting. February is always a really fun month. And Kendall is looking fantastic.
Mm-hmm. And our first night ski is this weekend. So this Saturday.
Any questions on these events or on the consent agenda? Or I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Okay.
Great. Roll call please, Melina.
Trustee Albertson? Here. Oh, yes. Trustee Wakefield? Trustee Wakefield?
Yes.
Trustee Schnitger?
Yes.
Trustee Gardner?
Yes.
Trustee George?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harper?
Here and yes.
Yes. We are still here. Yes, we are. Good work, guys. Good work. All right, then moving on to agenda item 6, staff reports.
So I'll spare you a lot of the stuff I was gonna say, but there is this Saturday. The other one is Silverton Single Track Society will be applying for a GoCo funding and has requested that the town and county be the co-applicants. They will do the legwork for the grant, but have been, but having the applications be submitted from the town and county could demonstrate a more unified approach and hopefully make the application more competitive. And so my ask to you all tonight is if you are okay with me working with Clem to have the town be a co-applicant.
I think this is a great way we can show support. Without, like, we're not writing a check. It's a great way to show support. Yeah.
And there might be a formal action later, but this is good for their prospectus for the grant.
Perfect.
Great. Still a lot of things on your to-do and upcoming issues list, Gloria.
I know. Never a dull moment. And that's all I really have substantially.
Great. I know John's on, his report's in here. Any questions for John or other stuff from staff reports?
I do want to put one shout out to the Kendall crew for keeping it running for 2 full weeks straight. And a ski-free Sunday in there, really driving people up here to ski and then just to hang out in town. So, and they just ran a really tight ship over there, and I really want to give them all a shout out for working so hard.
Okay, great. If there are no other questions, we'll move on to committee and board reports. San Juan Regional Planning Commission.
We covered it all.
Did a damn good job covering out.
Thank you both for your representation on that board. All right, the Finance Committee meeting. Wow, Jen, that feels like a long time ago. Let me see, I'm pulling up my notes. Let's see, it was the middle, I think all we talked about was the sales tax update and call a fund trust bank account. That was it, so. Nothing substantive there, except for sales tax continues to be at a high rate. So that was Finance Committee. Any other boards that met? I don't think so. It's holiday.
I'm a chamber meeting Wednesday. That's what.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, moving on to trustee reports. Thanks to everybody that came to cookies at my house. It was great fun. We had a lot of fun. If you couldn't make it, maybe we'll do it again next year. I too want to give a huge shout out to the Kendall team. Our family's been over there. We've dropped the kids off, just running it during winter break. And I think the thing I just remind the community is like, it was such an asset and it was making money and it was just crushing it during that week between Christmas and New Year's. And it's typical for a ski mountain to make like 80% of their revenues in that week. So what I've noticed is like, the parking lot's not as full, but we showed up there this weekend and it was like toddler hour from 11 to 12:30. And then it was all the grades from 2nd to 8th, making jumps, having fun. There's all ages, all backgrounds, because it's so accessible. So the fact that the town gives free ski passes, the school does rentals, it is just such an essential like heartbeat of our winter community for this community. And then night skiing where we see so many people. So thanks to Sarah for really making it running. We've had hockey on the rink. I've seen people shoveling it. I've seen all kids out there. So it's such a special town park. And thanks to the team for making it happen, to the community for dedicating funding to really get the lift. I mean, because it remains such a special asset. And I want to give a huge shout out to my colleagues for this hard work. Like this job isn't easy. You guys got on new and we're like, oh, we don't have any money to spend anymore. And we're raising rates on everybody. And we're not doing this. And I just really appreciate working with all of you going into 2025. It's just such an impressive, thoughtful, intentional, hardworking board. So thank you.
I appreciate the community for reading a like 300-page document and getting into it, the amount of public comment we had. For the planning committee, we tried to meet, once in October and there was a power outage. And then we tried to meet again and there was a power outage. And then we tried to meet again and there was the cell phone outage. And it felt like the universe was trying to say something, but people came up those stairs and went to the meetings despite the challenges. So that's just pretty cool that we have such a dedicated community who's going to read through that long document. So really shout out to everyone who participates.
We all care.
A lot.
Community cares a lot. Great. Any other trustee reports or updates? Okay. All right, moving on to 9A, continued business. This is a public hearing, second reading for adoption of ordinance 2024-10, an ordinance of the town of Silverton, amending chapter 13, article 1, section 13-150, tap fees of the Silverton Municipal Code, allowing the Board of Trustees to waive plant investment charges and tap fees for affordable housing projects.
All right, so at the November 12th regular meeting, staff was directed to draft a resolution for the waiver of development fees for affordable housing projects. And this would help us build these 9 units through the Silverton Housing Authority. We did draft this ordinance to just be reviewed by the board as well. So it is affordable housing and it does need to be approved by the board. So there's kind of 2 stopgaps there. We conducted the first reading December 9th, and this has been published in the Standard. And then the second reading, we are conducting as a public hearing on this meeting, and then it would be enforceable on February 12th. So. We do have one public comment in there that was submitted. Yeah, do you have any? Oh, and then I guess we'd open up to public comment after this.
Right. Thank you, staff introduction. So this is a public hearing about this proposed ordinance. So we'll open up for public comment. Do we have any in-person public comment for this ordinance? Okay, see none in person. Do we have any online public comment for this ordinance? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment. We'll move on to trustees' discussion and deliberation. I just wanted to kind of speak through the public comment we got from Mr. Hill. I think just to note for the record, in the past, as we've tried to work on affordable housing in this community, it hasn't always gone right. And there've been a variety of reasons for that. And it's been particularly around deed restrictions and how long that's lasted. And so I think as a public official, I certainly take seriously, like when we waive fees or when we change policies or when we subsidize properties, right? We are giving a unique benefit to a select few members of the community that are able to qualify or get the lottery number or whatever. And so I think I feel really good about our housing authority guidelines that we drafted that feel really intentional about as the town as a municipality is involved in affordable housing and building units that are inherently subsidized and come with a variety of kind of potential benefits, they also bring with them, you know, trade-offs that the homeowner, whoever's purchasing them or renting them, takes. And so I think we've done a pretty good job in our housing authority guidelines of protecting some of those kind of protections for the town and protections for the homeowner in perpetuity. So my continued thought on waiving these fees is like, we're always striking this balance between our water and sewer funds needing to be solvent. And also it's good for us to add users to the system because then they're paying into the system. And it's going to be very hard for us to get the funding to build these units anyways. And this is one small way that we can make our application a bit more attractive. And if these units didn't get built, this is town-owned property. So the only way for us to build on them and recapture these fees is if we do it or we sell them. And if these units don't get built, we don't see those ratepayers, we wouldn't get these tap fees anyways. So I feel comfortable waiving them because I think it's an overall benefit, and I think we have enough protections in our guidelines to preserve the affordability in perpetuity. That's my perspective. Thoughts?
I liked your previous point of the more like infrastructure in a small town is really challenging with like less people paying into the system. It becomes inherently more expensive. So the more people have paying into the system, the more efficient it becomes. So adding more ratepayers in town is really key. And this helps do that. Other thoughts, discussions?
I think we said it best at the other readings.
Great.
Yes.
Well, if no one has anything to add, it is a second reading. You can find your motion. It would be on page 405.
Okay, all right. I will make a motion to approve the second reading of adoption ordinance 2024-10, an ordinance for the town of Silverton, amending chapter 13, article 1, section 13-1-50, the tap fees for Silverton Municipal Code, allowing the Board of Trustees to waive plant investment charges and tap fees for affordable housing projects.
Second.
Trustee Alverson? Yes. Wakefield?
Yes.
Trustee Schnitger?
Yes.
Trustee Gardner?
Yes.
Trustee George?
Yes.
Pro Tem Harper?
Yes.
Mayor Cranky?
Yes. Thank you. All right, agenda item 10, public comment. This is closing public comment. If you're in person, you're welcome to make a public comment and you will have 3 minutes. Do we have any in-person public comment? No? Okay. Do we have any online comment? Please raise your hand and you'll be promoted to panelists. You will have 3 minutes. Thanks, everybody, for sticking with us.
Hey, everybody, it's me again. Can you hear me?
You can.
About 5 years ago, I read in the Telluride newspaper a letter that was written by a guy that had lived there a very, very long time. And he said that at one point, the town came up with a plan that he voted yes on that was for sustainable growth. And he thought it was going to be really good. And then it came up again and again and again and again. And nobody local like him can afford to live in town anymore. I have lived in Colorado all of my life, and every master plan should be changed every 10 years. In 10 years, people will move away, people move in, people die. And what it comes down to is money. Whether you think so or not, the person with the most money is going to get what they want. Thank you.
Thanks. Do we have other comment online? Please click the raise hand button and we'll promote you to panelist. All right, seeing none, we'll close public comment. So checking in with the board, we do have a request to go to executive session. We also have the option to postpone this executive session and push it to the next meeting. I'm just getting a check on whether people want to go into this executive session tonight, or give this attention in a different meeting. It's an important topic. We need to discuss it. Check in. Go ahead, Amy. You look like you want to say something.
No, I'm fine either way. I've been
Amy's
traveling for a while today.
Is there any opposition to moving this executive session to the next meeting?
That's a good choice.
Yeah. Great. All right, so we will continue. Clayton, do I need to make any particular do we need a motion to continue this executive session, or can we just give staff direction?
You need a motion to table the agenda item for the next meeting.
Okay. I would entertain a motion to table agenda item 11 till the next meeting. So moved. I'll second. Great. All right, roll call, please. Trustee Halverson? Yes. Trustee Wakefield?
Yes.
Trustee Schrichter?
Yes.
Trustee Gardner?
Yes.
Trustee George?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. All right, thank you all of you online. The time is 10:27 and I adjourn this meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cincy. Thanks, Joel, Tyler.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.